In reality, Zuoyamo was not confident at all. He had just made 45 child formations for the Skyring Moonchime formation. There were still 27 child formations until he reached 72 child formations. Mother and child formations like Skyring Moonchime formation usually had an attribute. The more child formations they had, the stronger they would be. The growth of power was a non-linear increase dependent on the number of single child formations, but increased in a pattern of values like 6, 12, 36, etc. The power of 45 child formations was just slightly stronger than 36 child formations. If he could complete 72 child formations, the power of the formation would be the difference between heaven and earth compared to a 36 child formation. It would go up an entire stage. Zuoyamo estimated that the power of a 72 child formation would be more than 4 times that of a 36 child formation. Of course, there were also differences in the difficulty of setting up the formations. When the number of child formation reached a certain amount, the difficulty would multiply when adding on one more formation. However, this was not the time to consider these things. He had no other choice. Zhong Mingyan did not have any intentions of relenting. Heading straight for Zuoyamo, Zuoyamo didn't hesitate, raising his hand to send out a 5-level multicolored mini pagoda. Once the 5-colored pagoda flew into the air, it grew in size. In the blink of an eye, it was the height of a person. The 5-colored pagoda flew into the sky above the pond. The pond below instantly filled with mist, moisture roiling. The moisture quickly rose up, reaching the base of the 5-color pagoda. From far away, it looked as though the water was supporting the 5-colored pagoda. The light of the 5-color pagoda lit up, the body of the pagoda continuously emitting countless flashes of 5-colored light that entered each formation. Centered around the pond, the jade pieces, copper cauldrons, and formation nails in the Tenmu formation belt lit up. If the formation belt could have been called sparkling before, then right now, it was like a gigantic piece of gold had been embedded into the green landscape, extremely gaudy. Naturally, it received the unanimous disdain of everyone. But when the entire Tenmu of formations completely lit up in the flick of a finger, that blinding scene, how many people had seen anything like it? No one had seen anything like it. Such a large formation belt. It could only appear in the restricted grounds of a sect, and not just any sect. There was none like it even around the Sword Cave of Wukong Sword Sect. There was none around Dongfu Hall. Heart Lake Sect did have one, but it had never been activated. The last time it was activated, it was several hundreds of years ago. The densely packed crowds of Xiuzha around Dongfu were completely struck dumb by such a spectacular scene. Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping's fight might be more profound and skillful, but in front of such an enormous formation, it became minuscule. With Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping's cultivating stages of Ningami, each sword energy would be 7 or 8 zhang. The longest would be 10 zhang. No matter how magnificent they were, they could not compare to the spectacle of 10 mu of formation being activated at once. For a short moment, all of Dongfu was completely silent. A moment later, people slowly came out of their shock. Dongfu instantly exploded. Several 10,000s of Xiuzha speaking at once, from extremely silent to waves of roaring. Some Xiuzha that were of weaker cultivation felt their eyes rings and could not hear anything anymore. After a while, their hearing finally recovered. However, everyone's discussion had not stopped. Quite the reverse, it had become even more fierce. Worth it. Definitely enough for me to come this far. Spectacular. As expected, Zuoyamo really has some abilities. He can also muster up something. What formation seal style? It is just Jinji. As everyone was sighed, the formation was completely activated. The formation belt about 10 mu big suddenly changed. A crescent rose up high over the pond, the light flashing. Inside the formation, green-blue mist rose, blurring the landscape. Inside the mist, countless light rings of various sizes floated in the air, gathering and scattering like a school of nimble fish. On the rooftop of one of Dongfu's residences, 3 people were standing together. Zuoyamo truly is a formations genius. Such a short period of time, and he could comprehend Skyring Moonchime formation. Really powerful. Luckily, we did not offend him that day. A red-robed male stared at the mirage and praised. These three were the customers that had Zuo process the inky black lotus seed. Humph, he's a Zhuji Xiozha. He can only take advantage of outside forces. What can he accomplish? The snarling man snorted. It's good to have low cultivation. The eagle-nosed man said darkly. You want to use force? Don't forget that he has a powerful Xixiang. The snarling male shook his head and said. All three of them were extremely wary, due to Wei Sheng's strong performance. We don't have enough people. His Xixiang isn't a bad substitute. The eagle-nosed man said. The snarling man still shook his head. He's only in Zhuji. No matter how skilled his formations are, it is still limited. It's alright as long as he has talent. The red-robed male suddenly opened. This isn't Tianhuan realm. It is not easy to find Xiozha skilled in formations. Wei Sheng might be powerful, but he is just one person. Us three brothers do not have to be afraid. The red-robed man held great authority among the three. Since he said so, the other two had no objections. Also, what the red-robed man said was the truth. There were many Xiozha that knew formations, but those that could be called skilled were extremely rare. Those that had some reputation, either their price was too high, or they were unwilling to risk their own personal safety. The snarling man smiled, and said, That's true. If he dares to have other thoughts, the new Black Lotus Yin banner that we just forged can be tested. The eagle-nosed man furrowed his brows. But how to persuade Zuo? That guy isn't easy to fool, and we cannot use force. The red-robed male was very confident about this point. He smirked. Temptation. That's easy with someone like Zuo. Even a person as obsessed with the sword as Wei Sheng won't be immune. As the three talked, Zhong Mingyan had reached the edge of the Skyring Moonchime formation. The moment the formation had activated, Zhong Mingyan's mind had blanked for a quick instant, but he quickly recovered. His steps were not rushed or slow, looking like a calm and relaxed expert. Only the shocking presence he was releasing expressed that the desire for battle inside had reached a peak. Zuo's figure had disappeared into the formation. The blue-green mist spread, forming its own little world. Countless rings of light in various sizes were nimble and lively. Occasionally, 2 rings of light would hit earth other, and chimes like that of glass would sound, clear and crisp. The chiming that passed through the mist were hard to follow, and echoed. What entered the eyes was blue-green mist and the swimming rings of light. Not just Zuo. Even the jade pieces and metal nails on the ground had disappeared. Ding ding dong dong. Zhong Mingyan couldn't help but snort. As the first seat of the younger generation of Dongqi sword sect, he followed his master in cultivating the sword, and had a very basic knowledge of formations. However, so what? He was not afraid in the least. One sword breaks all methods, that was a sword xiao. He had not reached that amazing step, but his opponent was just a Zhuji. A Xiozha only in Zhuji. Could he block the sword? He didn't believe it. As for his conflict with Zuo, he had long forgotten about it. He had never kept it on his mind. A disciple of his sect being banned, that was because his abilities were not as good as others. He was too lazy to care. He didn't have especially bad feelings about Zuo. Of course, he didn't have any good feelings either. It was a pity that Yu Bai and Nan Menyang had matched up. He was very regretful as he looked at Yu Bai and Nan Menyang that were fighting heatedly behind him. And then looking at Zuo ahead, he felt it was very bland. Even if it wasn't Yu Bai, he would be fine with Nan Menyang, but why was it Zuo? As he sighed in regret, he summoned out his flying sword. This was an extremely unique flying sword. The shape was like a section of old plum. There were many joints on the plum branch, appearing like a bone, old yet resilient. On the plum branch were 7 fresh and blooming plum blossoms, so fresh that they seemed to have just been picked. A faint fragrance floated in the air. 7 plum sword. Zuo Tian actually passed 7 plum sword to him. It seems he doesn't have low hopes for Zhong Mingyan. This is the first sword of Dongqi sword sect, 7 plum sword? As expected, it is extraordinary. Zuo Tian is really brave. Such a good sword, he actually gave it to a Ningmai disciple. Conversation rose, as everyone's expressions were full of awe. 7 plum sword was the most famous flying sword of Dongqi sword sect, ranked 4th grade. It was most suited to Dongqi sword sects, plum-cutting sword scripture. However, the reason that this sword was so famous was because its owner was Zhuo Meitian. In Sky Moonjia, Zhuo Meitian was a very famous personage. Everyone was especially wary of his cruelty and ruthlessness. These years he had not been seen much in public. The rumors had been that he had been focusing on teaching his disciple. Looking at it now, it was true. To pass a great treasure like 7 plum sword to Zhong Mingyan, it could be seen just how great his love was. The people that had been drooling over 7 plum sword quickly killed their greed. It was easy to deal with the young one. But if they fought the young one and the old one came, they couldn't deal with that. The faces of the 4 from Wukong sword sect were heavy. Even though they hoped that Zhuo Mo could leave the competition as soon as possible, but when they saw Zhong Mingyan take out 7 plum sword, their expressions changed slightly. Zhuo Meitian's ruthlessness was famed, and look at it, his disciple Zhong Mingyan was not a merciful person either. They were not worried that Zhuo Mo would lose the competition because it was already set in stone. They were worried that Zhuo Mo would be injured. If Zhong Mingyan was as heartless as his master, Zhuo Meitian, then today Zhuo Mo was in danger. However, at this time, Zhuo Mo's big formation was already up and running. Through the mirage, it was hard for them to see the situation inside the formation. Inside the blue-green formation, the rings of light danced, a crescent moon hanging over top of it all. In opposition to what everyone had imagined of Zhuo Mo being on guard to face a great enemy, Zhuo Mo was extremely busy. Taking advantage of the cover the formation was, he had silently sneaked to the other end of the formation, continuing to set up child formations for Skyring Moonchime formation. One more child formation, the power of the Skyring Moonchime formation, would increase a bit. His movements were extremely quick. After continuously putting down 45 child formations, he was extremely practiced. He guessed that Zhong Mingyan would try to test the waters in the beginning, so he decided to make good use of the time. You hit, I set. Wasn't it just competition on speed? Let's see if you first break the formation, or I first finish the formation. Zhuo Mo thought hatefully inside, his hands moving even quickly. No one would have thought that in such a time of emergency, Zhuo Mo was still persisting in laying down formations. Chapter 143 Heavyweight News. Wei Sheng's clothing was ripped, his entire body covered in countless little sword cuts, and he appeared to be out of energy. If the judges hadn't seen that he was still stubbornly persisting, they would have stepped in a long time ago. Gu Rongping's expression was peaceful. The darkness and viciousness on his face had disappeared long ago. He could be favored by so many to win, and had never lost until now. How could he be unable to see his own situation? When he realized he had made a mistake and started to adjust himself, Wei Sheng was instantly placed at a disadvantage. Heart Lake sword, heart like a lake, undisturbed. Wei Sheng struggled to keep going. If it wasn't that he had a more profound knowledge of sword essence, and could dodge or stop Gu Rongping at the last possible second, he would have lost already. Even so, he still could not stop Gu Rongping from attacking. Gu Rongping had changed from the previous impatience to a relaxed ease as his advantage was slowly increased. The sword scriptures were different, and the roads they walked would be drastically different. Some sword scriptures were forceful and explosive. What they needed was each attack to be like a thunderbolt, without keeping anything back. Some sword scriptures walked the path of entanglement. They did not pursue killing with one attack. They went for continuously accumulating an advantage like pulling silk off a cocoon, to exhaust the opponent, and in the end leave them with no energy to attack. Gu Rongping was so. Gu Rongping truly isn't bad. His Heart Lake sword is very advanced for such a young age. Bao Rong hadn't reached this level when he was his age. Tian Songzi couldn't help but praise. After a slight pause, he couldn't help but keep praising. This Wei Sheng is even better. Ning my stage and he could cultivate to heart-turn sword essence. Even more rare is that his personality is resilient and strong. Even though he is clearly trapped, he still does not submit. This boy will be great in the future. Yes. I'm afraid that Dongfu's sects will have to eat behind Wukong sword sect in the future. Lingying sect's leader Feng Qing glanced at Tian Songzi. These words were what many of Dongfu's little sects were thinking. Many people did not have good expressions. Tian Songzi knew it, but didn't state it, only faintly saying, "The strongest rule, the power naturally determines the benefits." Or does sect leader Feng believe Wukong Sword Sect does not have the power? Feng Qing choked, but he defended himself. "I'm afraid that Wukong Sword Sect will have too big of an appetite." Dislike rose in Tian Songzi's heart. He turned to look at the surrounding people, and said, "Wukong Sword Sect has been keeping a low profile all these years. If they were truly greedy people, with Ice Dragon Sword strength, there would not be many in Dongfu that could stop him, much less sect leader Pei and the others who are also Jindan." These words instantly made many people relax greatly. They found it was true when they thought about it. If Wukong Sword Sect were really those kind of people, did they even have the power to resist? Wukong Sword Sect is a part of Dongfu. Wukong Sword Sect is strong. Our Dongfu is strong. Dongfu is strong. Everyone here will naturally benefit. Tian Songzi said meaningfully. "Right. I see that sect leader Pei and the others are not those that would steal from others. If our Dongfu can take a step up among the 13 primary towns, that's beneficial for everyone." Someone praised. The others all agreed. No one could rival Tian Songzi's influence in Dongfu. Over all these years, he was mostly fair in his conduct, and everyone trusted him. The Lingying sect leader was on the side, his expression changing. Tian Songzi suddenly stood up. Everyone knew that he had something to say. The surrounding instantly feel silent. There are many people that do not know my initial motivation for holding this sword test conference. Tian Songzi started slowly. His voice was not loud, but there was an extra hint of solemnity. Everyone could help but perk their ears to listen. Those that were clever already realized that the matter was not simple. Maybe some people know, but it's possible some people do not know. Tian Songzi paused slightly, before continuing. "Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia is showing signs of instability." First it was silent, then it was a ruckus. No way, how is it possible? Weren't there many experts holding the fort in Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia? The panicked voices flowed. These light words were like lightning on a clear day, instantly shaking up all the sect leaders. Even Lingying sect's leader was struck dumb. Gradually, fear started to show on his face. Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia was the buffer between Xiuzha and Yaoma. That was the paradise where countless Xiuzha hunted Yao. As long as you had the power, you could receive anything you wanted. Jingshi talismans, rare materials. Expert after expert became famous there. It was the backyard of the Xiuzha, the material store of the Xiuzha. So when Tian Songzi said Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia was showing signs of instability, they hadn't managed to react to the connection between the Sword Test Conference and Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia, had not reacted to the implications behind this news. Only when people remembered how Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia had formed did they suddenly wake. Even the most composed person had a changed expression. Is the news confirmed? The market didn't have any news at all. Terror quickly spread across the people. They were only asking out of reflex. Everyone knew if Tian Songzi could say this publicly, the news definitely would not be fake. Tian Songzi had more avenues of information than they did. Tian Songzi lightly sighed. "Everyone please prepare. This time, the first 100 local Xiuzha, I will open the secret realm for them." This was another heavyweight news. Secret realm. A secret realm was like an extremely small Jia. No one knew how a secret realm formed, but each Jia would have secret worlds. But how many there were, it was unable to be predicted. Secret realms were all different, but there were similarities. In every secret realm, the Ling energy inside would be plentiful, and it would be extremely beneficial to cultivate inside. Inside the secret realm, due to the high density of Ling energy, and the lack of people, there would be large numbers of rare Ling grasses and beasts. And in some secret realms, there would also be residences left behind by ancient Xiuzha. No one would have thought that Dongfu Hall would have a secret realm. As expected of the true master of Dongfu, the wealth he possessed was truly unimaginable. This secret realm had been discovered by my ancestral founder. However, it is a pity that Xiuzha above Jindan cannot enter, so this secret realm has been unopened until now. Since a great calamity is approaching, the disciples of all sects, as long as they enter the top 100, they can enter this secret realm. But as to what they can obtain, that will be up to their good fortune. Tian Songzi said. A small smile finally came onto the fearful faces of those large sect leaders. If they were talking about disciples from the top 10, then Dongfu might not have many, but the top 100, the core disciples of most of the Dongfu sects were basically all in there. Elders' efforts. We really are shamed. A sect leader suddenly came out and bowed deeply to Tian Songzi. The other sect leaders also came out and bowed in thanks to Tian Songzi. To open one's secret realm, and allow disciples from other sects to enter, such a matter, it had never been heard of before. Tian Songzi's breadth of mind received everyone's admiration. Even Lingying sect leader Feng Qing did not hesitate in bowing. There was no joy on Tian Songzi's face. He sighed. The fire of succession. Only when there is fire can it be passed on. Everyone's heart started to fall. From Tian Songzi's words, they finally realized that the situation was far worse than they had imagined. Zhong Mingyan saw those nimble rings of light, but still unhesitatingly stepped into the formation. Once he stepped in, the scenery around him instantly changed. Limitless blue-green mist covered the empty wilderness. He was in the middle of the wilderness, his surroundings empty. In the sky above his head, light rings of various sizes swam like schools of fish. In the faint blue-green mist that was like what occurred during sunrise, the chimes from the collisions became even more ethereal. Those mischievous and nimble rings of light danced high above his head, and even higher up, a crescent moon hung, its faint shine falling on this patch of wilderness, giving even the mist a blurry shine. This was a formation that a Zhuji could set up? Zhong Mingyan was slightly surprised and had to reconsider Zuo. He may have little knowledge of formations, but he had received Zuo Mei Tian's attentive teachings, and a half-assed outer sect disciple like Zuo could not compare. Even though he was not clear what formation Zuo had set up, but he could clearly understand the meaning contained in the formation in front of his eyes. He decided to put away the disdain in his heart. This Zuo could be considered a genius in formations. Zhong Mingyan casually walked, strong confidence revealed in his expression. So what if the other was a formations genius? He did not have any fear in his heart. Quite the opposite. He, who had thought he had picked a bland opponent, started to feel anticipation. Zhong Mingyan's desire for battle increased even more. Gently shaking his wrist, the plum branch in his hand sliced and made a circle. A plum blossom gently trembled and fell of the plum branch, floating into the sky. One cut plum. This plum flower silently shattered in the air, turning into a pink ball of light. The light seemed to be pulled by two invisible hands in opposite directions, quickly pulled long and thin. A circle of faint sword essence, with the pink ball of light as the center, suddenly spread out towards the surroundings. The long and pink sword essence had no warmth or gentleness. Quite the opposite. When it truly became a sword energy, the harsh and sharp sword essence reached a peak. Zhong Mingyan narrowed his eyes, and his expression just like that pink sword energy became sharp and menacing. The energy being disrupted, the dancing rings of light in the air were like startled schools of fish. The chimes of collisions were like rain. Go! Zhong Mingyan shouted, the plum branch in his hand leading. The long and narrow pink sword energy suddenly brightened, drawing a bright pink light in the air as it headed into the rings of light. The sword energy was extremely sharp. The rings of light were like bubbles, popping upon a single touch. The fragments of light rained down like snowflakes. Under the bright moonlight, inside the blue-green mist, the dots of broken light flushed away the killing intent carried by the sword essence, and added a hint of poignancy. Zuo couldn't help but inhale sharply. This Zhong Mingyan's power wasn't on the same level as that Chaoan he had encountered before. The power in that one blow was enough to frighten his little heart to beat rapidly. If before he had some thoughts about attacking first, Zhong Mingyan's sword strike instantly made him understand how unrealistic his thoughts were. The only method he had now was defense. This was the only thing he could do. If Zhong Mingyan found his position, Zuo was sure that, with his half-learned sword essence, he would lose within 3 blows. After making a decision, The last stray thought in Zuomo's mind was erased. His hands became even faster. Faster. Chapter 144. Strange Zhong Mingyan quickly frowned. Those rings of light had appeared extremely weak, like bubbles that popped upon contact, but there really were too many of them. His sword essence had, without him detecting it, had much of its momentum lost, and its strength had been worn down by half. However, the rings of light in the sky did not seem to decrease in number. Even more, he still had not found Zuomo. His eyes looked in the surroundings and didn't find any shadow of Zuomo. He knew that, in a formation, one should not believe what the eyes showed. His consciousness had also swept through the surroundings, but it would always encounter strange interference that prevented him from detecting Zuomo. All of this indicated that the formation Zuomo had constructed was not normal. Zhong Mingyan did not panic, however. Everyone always saw him brimming with murderous intent, and assumed that he wanted to find Zuomo to immediately to defeat him. In reality, it was not so. He enjoyed battle, and enjoyed the pleasure of being challenged. The stronger Zuomo was, the more his desire for battle rose. He planned on destroying Zuomo's entire formation. What would be more pleasurable than destroying the other's strongest defense from the ground up? This made Zhong Mingyan's blood boil. The noise when Skyring Moonchime formation had been activated had truly been scary. Not just the audience in Dongfu, but even the other Xiuzha in the Great Pine Pavilion had been shocked by the sudden light. Many Xiuzha were curious, but they still didn't dare to walk around freely, all staying in their original places. As for the powerful Xiuzha, they did not have any hesitations about running towards the source of the light. Su pushed her movement speed to the maximum. To stop other Xiuzha from ambushing her along the way, she released the Ling power in her body spread out without anything holding back. The Black Day's sword under her feet released a powerful magnetism. Different from the howling flight of other flying swords, the flight of the Black Day's sword was more like gliding. But due to its terrifying speed, it howled as it broke through the air. She did not conceal herself as she raced towards the source of the light. That cowardly guy that ate soft rice actually did not send out the paper crane. In flight, Su couldn't help but furrow her brows. She held extreme dislike for Zuomo's conduct. He clearly knew his strength was not enough but still acted on his own. It was very easy for his companions to dislike him. Even though Su did not think of Zuomo as her companion, but she needed Zuomo's help to forge her flying sword. This meant that she could not disregard Zuomo's safety. If Zuomo could not enter the top 10, then no matter how high of a rank she achieved, it would be useless. She disliked people who increased the difficulty of things she had to do. Only this once. After this affair ended, she never wanted to see this dislikable guy again. Suddenly, she thought of what Lin Qian Shixiang said to her, and her heart became even more irritated. Chang Heng still casually strolled, but the light released by the Skyring Moonchime formation was peerlessly bright, far surpassing the light of any sword energy. That's an interesting guy, he said to himself, before leaping into the air. Carrying a patch of bloody light, he disappeared. At a hill, a figure suddenly disappeared, and then suddenly appeared not far away, before disappearing, and then appearing even further away. Because of the speed of movement, before the afterimage at the previous place had vanished, he would appear at the next position. Where he passed, he left behind a string of shadows, extremely strange. Gui Feng was using his ghost movement to run. In the blink of an eye, he was far away, his speed not much slower than a flying sword. But that direction. The Xiuzha along the way gaped as they stretched their necks to look in the direction that Gui Feng disappeared in. It was the place that was flashing with light. Luo Li had thought of being a hunter waiting for his prey, but he was slightly shocked by the light that had suddenly rose on the horizon. That scene. It definitely wasn't something caused by a sword energy or something like it. Truthfully, a person that could create self-separation. There wouldn't be any problems with his intelligence. He quickly knew what it was. Formations. Only formations. He instantly was speechless. Of all the Xiuzha that attended the last round of the sword test conference, only one person would lose the face of Sword Xiu to make formations. There was only Zuomo, such a person that does not endear himself to others. Luo Li said helplessly to himself. Grabbing the flying sword, he stood up. He had spent the longest with the sect leader and the others, and knew their thoughts better. Maybe he should go and kick the other out of the competition, to spare him from further humiliation. He wasn't certain about the sect leader, but he believed the other Shifu definitely would not oppose it. In reality, curiosity dominated Luo Li's heart. That fight with Zhou Mo had been the most important turning point in his life. At the beginning, he had been slightly angry and hateful, but gradually, as Luo Li reflected on himself, his hate towards Zhou Mo had disappeared without a trace. If not for Zhou Mo, he was afraid that he would still be living his days out muddle-headedly like before. That would be terrible. But he definitely didn't have any thoughts of thanking Zhou Mo. He was naturally curious. When Zhou Mo had fought with him, the difference in cultivation between them had been great, but in the end, Zhou Mo had won. He had seen Zhou Mo's fight in the sword test conference. The difference in cultivation between Zhou Mo and his opponent had been even greater, but Zhou Mo had won again. All those dazzling tricks that Zhou Mo had showed had greatly expanded his vision, but he couldn't help but find it pitiful. He really couldn't understand, with Zhou Mo's great talent in the sword, why would he not cultivate the sword, and rather learn all those middling things? In the time that he had created self-separation, his comprehension of the sword was much deeper than before, and his eyes were naturally better. With one look, he had seen that while Zhou Mo had many tricks up his sleeve that made people gasp in awe, but it was a great obstacle for him in his future cultivation of the sword. Heterogeneity was the greatest taboo of sword xiu, but Luo Li was still curious. Even though he was shaking his head inside, but he was still curious what Zhou Mo would do. This guy was extremely cunning and slippery, with an endless bag of creative tricks. Adding on that he was an extremely treacherous person, and if he could ambush someone twice, he definitely wouldn't do it only once. This sword test conference, there were many experts. The difference between Zhou Mo and them was even greater. He might not understand Zhou Mo very well, but he felt that Zhou Mo was not someone that would easily surrender. If he didn't cause some trouble, he probably wouldn't surrender. Would not easily surrender, had many tricks, and some power. This kind of weirdo. How could people not have a little bit of anticipation? It would be good to see. Luo Li spoke to himself as he stepped on the flying sword, and left the mountain valley. Chang Heng was the first person to appear outside the formation. Right after, Su and Guifeng almost appeared at the same time. The appearance of three experts caused the Xiuzha that had been hiding in the dark to feel as though his heart had jumped out of his chest. These three, none of them were easy to deal with them. Luo Li quickly appeared not far away. Facing the three experts, he was extremely calm. Without a word, he sat down cross-legged on the ground, his flying sword floating in front of him. Chang Heng turned with slight shock to look at Luo Li. Su and Guifeng turned their faces at the same time to look at Luo Li. In their perception, the seated Luo Li was disappearing bit by bit. But they could clearly see him sitting there, not having moved at all. The three of them were slightly shocked. It seemed that every disciple of Wukong sword sect had some skill. "I'm not fighting," Nan Menyang bellowed, and then took a step back. No matter who it was, realizing that there were strong opponents in the surroundings, would not be willing to use up all their power. Yubai did not say anything but backed up a step at the same time. He didn't want to fight either. With so many experts at the sidelines, if even one of them attempted an ambush, he wouldn't be able to deal with it. However, the attention of this group of people was not on them, but on the formation. The two exchanged a look and, at the same time, turned to look at the formation, waiting to see the spectacle. Not long after, another person came to spectate. It was the yellow-faced man that Chang Heng had encountered previously. Occasionally other Xiuzha would land outside the formation. Those that dared to come up to watch at this time were experts that had confidence in their power. Up until now, other than Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping that were still fighting heatedly on the main peak, basically all the experts had gathered here. Such a strange scene. Not just the competitors but even the Xiuzha watching the mirage in Dongfu were gaping. What was this? Everything in front of their eyes, no matter what direction they looked, carried a strange atmosphere. A formation with a moon hanging over it, and a crowd of people outside. All of them were experts, Almost all of the top 10 from the rankings were present. It was like a gathering of experts. If they didn't have the power, they would be too embarrassed to come over. The battle between Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping, which had been watched by the most people, quickly was abandoned by everyone. Everyone's turned to Zuomo's position. Strange. Too strange. If these experts didn't come from different sects and different places, some with stronger backgrounds than Dongfu Hall, they would definitely be suspicious that someone was manipulating the competition from the shadow. But right now, all of them were performing the same action, stretching their necks out, looking into the formation projected by the mirage. It was like there was an astonishing beauty hiding in the formation, and she was completely naked. Pei Yuan ran, and the others were also gaping. Behind them, the crowd of Wukong sword sect disciples were dumbstruck. What are they doing? Yinlu stammered out. Pei Yuan Ran's lips trembled, but he didn't know what to say. He looked dumbly at the scene and couldn't say anything. Xian Yan, who was usually stoic and wooden, had his mouth wide open, his eyes bulging. Shi Fengrong was covering her mouth, her eyes widened greatly, not noticing how strange it was that she was maintaining this position. They want to watch. Yanlu hesitantly stammered out. To watch? They aren't fighting. Pei Yuan Ran felt blood rise to his throat, his vision turning black, and almost fainted. When he raised his head again, his face was bright red. Heavens! Ancestral masters! Forgive this disciple. If before, he had only been regretting his action of making Zuo attend the last round of the sword test conference, right now he wanted to smash his head against the wall and kill himself. Yen Li's words swirled in his head. To watch, they wouldn't fight. Chapter 145. Nan Minyang. A real man. Different from the outside, Chong Hung and the others could clearly see every move that Zhong Mingyan made inside the formation. However, Zuo was still hidden away. Zhong Mingyan's one-cut plum brightened many people's eyes. In reality, Zhong Mingyan did not feel well. It was like his punch had landed in soft cotton, his power undetectably being dissipated. He couldn't help but frown. It was not because he felt it was difficult, but out of dislike. He disliked this kind of soft attack very much. Most sword shio did not like fighting with warm and soft enemies. If they did not kill off the other in one attack, then what awaited them was endless trouble. Such enemies usually had great defenses. It was extremely hard to get them in one attack. As the battle progressed, it would become a labor of endurance. The endurance of most sword shio definitely was not good. He hadn't thought that this Zuo would also be this way. Zhong Mingyan started to rub his forehead. Zuo had been frightened by Zhong Mingyan's sword strike, his little hands shaking as they were setting up the formation, almost ruining it. Don't think that he was familiar with Skyring Moonchime formation. He was only familiar with the theory. The amount wasted by the enormous formation was astounding. Normally, he didn't have that much Jingshur to waste. Luckily, the first sword energy had been blocked. The replenishing rings of light didn't look as though they were damaged. Zuomo's heart landed slightly. He had just started studying Skyring Moonchime formation. How to set it up, what materials it needed, it was more than enough for him. As to the different variations, he was not familiar with them. There was no way around it. There was not enough time. From the time that the sect leader had notified him about attending the last round of the sword test conference until now, he had used almost all his time on this, and had just barely understood how to set it up. Even more so, what he was setting up this time was a 72-child formation, Skyring Moonchime formation. For that Kunlun introductory formation Jade Scroll, he had gone all in. Even though he was greatly rushed, but he still tried his best, his hands fleetingly fast. The great pressure did not make him panic. Quite the opposite, it was like he was shot with chicken blood. His entire body was abnormally exuberant. His consciousness was completely spread out. His attention focused like it never had been before. The uncompleted formation and the components appeared so clear in front of his eyes. Because he had practiced finger movements for so long, his 10 fingers were extremely nimble. Vajra Profound Sutra had been in effect, and his physical strength far surpassed most sword shio, and he could easily lift up the large pieces of material. His consciousness was even more terrifying. covering the entire formation. Any change would be unable to escape his consciousness. He was a blurry shadow, furiously setting down formations. Countless materials flowed like water from his hands, accurately thrown to the positions needed. His fingers were like fresh flowers blooming. After images flickering as ripple after ripple of Ling force was sent from his constantly moving fingers into the formation. With the aid of the formation's power, Zuemo hid himself so no one else could see him. No one knew where Zuemo was. Everyone had assumed that Zuemo was hiding in a certain place, waiting for an opportunity to give Zhongming Yin a killing blow at the most dangerous time. No one knew that the enormous formation in front of them was an incomplete formation. Raising his head to look at the crescent moon in the sky, Zhongming Yan's fretful heart calmed. He was proud, but he was not dumb. To be able to stand out from so many other disciples, who would be dumb? Those rings of light definitely were not the crux to breaking the formation, he thought. He stood in his spot. The light rings in the air were like free fish, not attacking him. Was it that crescent moon? The bright moon over his head seemed far yet real, not appearing at all like something created by the formation. Truthfully, it wasn't just the bright moon. Everything inside this formation was no different than really. But he knew that everything he saw were all created by the formation. They were all fake. There was no formation in the world that could not be solved, just like there was no invincible sword Xiao in this world. Any formation would have a cover door. The so-called cover door referred to the Achilles heel of the formation, and the crux to solving a formation. Where was the cover door of this formation? The light in Zhongming Yan's eyes flashed. He stood like that in his spot and started to think. Yu Bai, who had just stopped fighting, felt someone come close and turned to look. He saw his previous opponent, Nan Menyang, come over with his exaggerated sword. He couldn't help but be on his guard. What's he doing? Nan Menyang bellowed, a face full of curiosity. His voice was like thunder. Even though he had pushed it extremely low, everyone could hear him. Yu Bai first stilled, but seeming that Nan Menyang's expression did not seem like he was joking, he suddenly remembered that Nan Mengyan had no family or sect. Then he understood. Sword Xiao with no family nor sect could not compete at understanding all of the fundamentals with seedlings, like Yu Bai, that had been nurtured from childhood. Yu Bai noticed that other people's eyes had wandered over to him. Composure. Master said, I need to be warm and respectful. Gently coughing, Yu Bai warmly explained. Zhongming Yan is thinking of a way to solve it. That needs thinking? Nan Menyang stared with his bell-sized eyes, unconsciously raising his voice as he examined Yu Bai. Just chop him down. And says, you guys, you are so womanishly fussy. If it was in. Nan Menyang's usual voice was loud enough. This was like thunder roaring, so loud that Yu Bai's ears rang. The tendons in Yu Bai's forehead jumped slightly. He hadn't thought that this guy would be so chatty. It was unknown who laughed first. The tendons in Yu Bai's forehead started to pulse again. Composure. He forced out a smile. This formation is extremely difficult. It would be hard to solve. Nan Mengyang once again interrupted Yu Bai, looking at him in puzzlement, his eyes widening again. What solve? Just cut it down. But that guy's body, tisk, more petite and supple than my lover, about the same as you. If it was the more Nan Menyang talked, the more excited he got. His right hand in a fist, he tore apart his clothing, furiously beating his masculine chest that was as hard as metal, breathing heavily through his nose like a gorilla. Petite and supple. Yu Bai's handsome face instantly twisted. The Ling power in his body almost running out of control like a tsunami that could erupt at any time. Composure. Nan Menyang did not detect it. He was like a furious bull, staring at the formation, wanting to try it out. But his mouth did not stop for a second. Look at what swords you guys are using. They are thin like chopsticks. Are they even usable? A man should use a sword like this. He raised the door-sized sword in his hand, and waved it and proudly said, Don't understand? I'm telling you this in confidence. And's lover told him, need big. Need big. Need bigger. A real man uses a big sword. He suddenly closed his mouth, hesitating for a moment before lowering his voice to ask suspiciously, Are you really a man? Flash, everyone's eyes moved to Yu Bai. Having reached the limits of his tolerance, Yu Bai finally could not bear it any longer. His face was as black as ink, his handsome features twisted. Screw composure. The flying sword in his hand pointed straight at Nan Mingyang, angrily shouting, "Shut up! Let's fight!" Nan Mingyang paused and then furiously shook his large head. "I only fight with men." Disregarding Yu Bai completely, he raised his large sword, pointed it at the formation and excitedly hollered, "En's going to chop the formation! And has never chopped something like this. Haha, take a good look at En. Real men will chop the formation." Finishing, with his enormous sword held up high, in big strides, he charged at the formation like a bull. Yu Bai was enraged and completely lost his mind. He shrieked, "Stop! You're mine!" He turned into a white flash, chasing Nan Mingyang and headed into the big formation. Su had been laughing on the inside hearing Nan Mingyang's sinister words, but this sudden change shocked her so much she couldn't stop them in time. Damn it! There were now 3 people in the formation. Zhuo definitely wouldn't be able to deal with it. Thinking about this, she panicked, stomped her foot and charged into the Skyring Moonchime formation, with the Black Day's sword. Gui Feng saw Su rush into the formation. A cold light flashed through his eyes before he also disappeared. The heart of the yellow-faced man also moved, and he unhesitatingly charged into the formation. Chang Heng said to himself, "Interesting." Finishing, he headed to the formation, but compared to the others he walked calmly. Luo Li stood and brushed off the non-existent dust on his clothes. He said helplessly, "Why am I in the same sect as this guy?" As he spoke, he started walking towards the formation. The other Xiuzha hesitated a while. Right after, there were people continuously charging into the formation. The Xiuzha that charged in were all very excited, aching for battle. They were all Xiuzha that did not fear the competition. Almost all the experts in the sword test conference were now inside the formation. It was a rare chance to be able to compete with these experts. Such a great gathering. If they missed it, it would be the regret of a lifetime. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Figure after figure charged into the formation. A formation brimming with blue-green mist under a crescent moon was like a gigantic whirlpool, continuously sucking the surrounding Xiuzha inside. Everyone that was watching the competition in Dongfu was dumbstruck. Even though they could see clearly from the mirage, but the sounds were not passed on. The people on the outside didn't know what happened. What was occurring in front of their eyes far surpassed their imagination. The experienced Tian Songzi was also gaping. Why is Bayer so excited? What happened? He had never seen Yu Bai so excited. In his memories, his beloved disciple was forever warm and elegant, respectful and polite. What was this? No one was able to tell him. All those that charged into the formation were experts, the best and most exceptional disciples of the sects in Sky Moon Jia, the greatest among the younger generation. They all had great potential. They carried the hopes of each sect. What they learned were the best teachings in Sky Moon Jia, and what they used were the best talismans and flying sword. They seemed to be crazy at the moment, furious desire for battle on each person's face. Their eyes, as they looked at the formation, were filled with yearning. That formation, just how seductive was it? No matter if it was those floating in the air, or on the ground, time seemed to stop at this moment. The Xiuzha, regardless of their cultivation, they were gaping, their expressions dumb, limbs motionless, not making a sound as though they were statues. At this moment, Dongfu was so quiet that it was possible to hear a needle land on the ground. Chapter 146. Zuomo's sorrowful indignation. Yan Li's expression was extremely strange. He focused on business, and naturally could understand lip language. Those that also knew how to read lips were also like Yan Li. They were stunned by Nan Mingyang's onslaught of words. The surroundings were too quiet, so quiet it was strange. Yan Li tried to open his mouth a few times, but couldn't say a word. This strange silence was like a kind of pressure. No one spoke at this time. Pei Yuanrant's mind was a mess. He had completely lost the ability to think. The strange scene in front of him was the straw that broke the camel's back. All of his intelligence, his experience, none of it was useful right now. His gaze was blank. Why did the sect have such a problematic person? Buzz, buzz, buzz. Like the sound of bees flapping their wings, the noise steadily grew, gathering into a flood, booming. Everyone felt their ears ring. In one instant, they could not hear anything. After a while, this wave of sound calmed and became peaceful. Shock, weirdness, amazement. All kinds of emotions were mixed together on the audience's faces. No one could keep their calm. This Nan Menyang's mouth is stronger than flying swords. Yanlu couldn't help but praise. That's right, he really was praising. His societal experience was extremely rich, and knew just how effective a mouth was at many times. Shifeng Rong hurriedly inquired. After Yanlu finished narrating Nan Menyang's words, the others were also dumbstruck. Who could have thought such a brute-looking man was able to say such dark and malicious words? Oh, maybe Nan Menyang didn't do it on purpose. The only person that might not think that way would probably be Tian Songzi. Tian Songzi could imagine just how fiery the anger inside his beloved disciple was burning for him to lose his composure so. It was like he was experiencing it himself, killing intent on his old face. At this time, the surrounding sect leaders naturally wouldn't touch his sore spot. It wasn't all due to the inheritance that his ancestors left him that Tian Songzi was able to control Dongfu for all these years. His own personal power was unfathomable. Very quickly, real men use big swords. Quickly spread through the Xiuzha. Those Xiuzha that used big swords raised their heads and puffed their chests. However, most of the Xiuzha looked as though they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They finally understood what had happened. The blankness in Pei Yuan Ran's eyes disappeared greatly. Everything had a limit. Sometimes this limit would change, as the attribute of the matter changed. Like using formations. Before, Pei Yuan Ran felt it was embarrassing. However, when the formation that Zhuo Mo laid down could cause such a big ruckus, and caught a crowd of experts, Pei Yuan Ran felt somewhat proud inside. Which other person's disciple could make such a ruckus with a formation? No matter if Zhuo Mo's formation won or lost in the end, after this competition, maybe there would be people that would mock you by, but there definitely wouldn't be any mockery of Zhuo Mo and his formation. They finally figured out what had happened, but the curiosity the people had did not decrease the slightest, and became even stronger. What was happening in the formation? So many experts gathered inside one formation. What changes would occur? How would they solve the formation? Everyone was filled with curiosity. At this time, Xiaoguo suddenly made a sound of surprise. Xixiang's formation seems to be getting bigger. Xiaoguo's words instantly caused other people's eyes to land on Zhuo Mo's formation. Xian Yin suddenly said, "Yes, it is getting bigger." Shock came into the eyes of Pei Yuan Ran and the others. The disciples were puzzled. One here, and another one. Hurrying about setting up the formation, Zhuo Mo was dumbstruck. What were these people doing? Were they crazy? He only paused for a little while, and then was enraged. Just Zhong Mingyan alone was enough to exhaust him. You guys are coming to add insult to injury. That's right, Zhuo Mo instantly set down his opinion of the people's conduct. Adding insult to injury. Even though he didn't understand what great grudge these people had against him. But it was clear that they were not coming to help him. Adding insult to injury was the most distasteful action. Zhuo Mo gritted his teeth. At this time he was not thinking about winning at all. So many experts entering the formation. To even think about winning was a delusion. Villains. You crowd of villains. Go will destroy all of you. He seemed to see the Kunlun Jade scroll reluctantly waving its hands to say goodbye to him. Going further away from him. Zhuo Mo was indignant and sorrowful. It was this indignation at his grievous losses that allowed Zhuo Mo to quickly make a decision. He was going to give these people that were adding insult to injury a memorable lesson. Want to benefit from G'll ruin all your teeth. He didn't think about retreat. His eyes entirely red. He used the most poisonous and malicious words to curse this damned crowd of people. At the same time, his movements became even faster. All kinds of materials streaming from his hands like they didn't cost Jingshi. He felt that the blood in his body was burning. He was completely furious. The formation is still getting bigger. It really is increasing. Didn't you hear Nan Menyang say? Want big, want big, want bigger. If I'm Zhuo Mo, I'd first leave, since everyone is trapped in there. Escape? Where would he escape? The moment he leaves the formation, he would just be waiting for death. Everyone outside is stronger than him. Without the protection of the formation, he would die even quicker. The sound of discussion rose. Everyone was puzzled by why Zhuomo's formation was getting bigger. But in all the versions, no one could guess what Zhuomo was planning. Was Zhuomo still delusional? No one would think that. There were too many experts in there. All the experts in the sword test conference were in there. Pitted against any competitors, Zhuomo would undoubtedly lose. Much less the experts that were gathered together. Everyone just needed to make a move, and this large formation would undoubtedly collapse. Collapse? Zhuomo was very clear what the people in the formation thought. He smirked coldly inside, his hands not slowing down. Skyring Moonchime Formation was a 4th grade formation. If there weren't some strong points, how would it have the qualification to be a 4th grade formation? Maybe they could break the formation, but it definitely wouldn't break in 1 or 2 moves. If they could not find the cover door of the formation, they didn't need to think about breaking or solving it using brute power alone. This cover door was not that easy to find. Zhuomo's actions were lightning fast. This caused the formation to quickly grow, and was easily detected by the Xiuzha outside. But no one dared to go into the formation. The formation had now become the most dangerous area in the entire Great Pine Pavilion. After Su entered the formation, she felt her vision blur, and she was situated in the wilderness. The cold moonlight fell down like water. She felt as though she was in a dream. Looking in the surroundings, everything was blurred. She didn't know where to start. That damned guy that ate soft rice. Why didn't he send out the paper crane yet? She was extremely panicked. She completely forgot that up until now, Zhuomo had not relied on her, and wasn't actually eating soft rice. After Nan Menyang charged into the formation, he sunk into a berserker rage. His Vajra scripture was at his maximum, his entire body covered in the golden light. Together with his tall and brawny figure, he was a god of battle. He gave a shout, and the mountain breaker sword viciously chopped. This sword chopped towards the rings of light in the sky. An extremely dense sword energy left the sword, howling as it rushed into the rings of light in the sky. The chimes were endless, like countless glass bottles were being broken. Guifeng, who had just came in, saw this scene and jumped in shock. Such a forceful blow, if it was heading for him, no matter if he fended it or dodged, it would not be easy. Yet what surprised him was this blow that even he found difficult to defend was not effective in the slightest against the formation. It was like the fierce and sharp sword had broken the surface of the water. After the ripples passed, the surface of the water resumed normality. Guifeng quickly found the weirdness. He had headed in immediately after Su, but he did not find Su's figure, encountering Nan Menyang instead. Did this formation have the ability to move others? His consciousness was also being disrupted by an invisible ripple, and was ineffective in the formation. Guifeng was in awe. Different from other people, he did not underestimate Zhuomo. He was skilled in underhanded and obscure skills, and did not walk the path of righteousness. Higher cultivation did not mean that one would definitely win. Seeing so many people enter the formation, but not having found the cover door, it was not an easy matter to leave. Then, where was the cover door? Like Nan Menyang, the first thing many Xiuzha did after they entered the formation was release attacks. However, to everyone's surprise, it was like their attacks had entered the sea, ineffective. Some powerful experts instantly stopped their futile efforts, and started to think about the problem of solving the formation. Zhong Mingyan hadn't expected so many people would charge into the formation at once. He couldn't help but frown. This group of people were really irritating. Like a swarm of flies. He hadn't solved the formation yet, but these people were coming in to also meddle. He was extremely displeased. Even though he still hadn't found the cover door of this formation. But Zhong Mingyan did not believe that he could not harm a Zhuji disciple. But now that the situation was completely disrupted, this group of people had appeared out of nowhere, each of them seemingly insane, attacking in all directions as they came in. Suppressing the irritation inside, he smirked coldly as he put away the 7-plum sword. You group of dumbasses. I'll watch to see what you guys can do. After having tried one blow, Zhong Mingyan was certain that this formation was not as simple as imagined. He was extremely shocked inside. Such a formation. Was it something a Zhuji Xiuzha could set up? He didn't quite believe it, but the truth was right in front of his eyes, and he had personally tried. Maybe it was a good thing these people have come to be cannon fodder. Zhong Mingyan's eyes became even colder. Zuomo was still buried in setting up formations. His speed was extremely quick. He had already reached the 63rd formation. In other words, there were only 9 child formations until he could complete the 72 child formation, Skyring Moonchime formation. A Skyring Moonchime formation, with 72 child formations. Humph humph, you guys can get a good taste. Already extremely tired, Zuomo suddenly felt his body full of energy, his movements even faster, as he continued his expansion. He had great expectations for the 72 child formation, Skyring Moonchime formation. Even he hadn't ever seen it before. What power would it have? There wasn't a better place to try it out than right now. At this time, a tragic howl could be heard from inside of the formation. Chapter 147. Born to battle, a Xiuzha had just tried to use a flying sword to attack the crescent moon hanging in the sky. Unexpectedly, this action seemed to enrage those harmless-looking rings of light. First, a light ring surrounded his body, then contracted. No one had expected a light ring that seemed to break with a touch could contain such great power. The sword Xiu instantly howled under the noose, his eyes flipping over, and fainted. Just as everyone was shocked, a black gold chain came down from the sky and accurately lassoed this unconscious Xiuzha. Unconscious, judged loss, elimination from the competition. A cold voice sounded in everyone's ears and then it was quiet. Everyone knew it was the judges hidden in the shadows that had acted and saved the Xiuzha. The judges that had been invited to the last round were all Jindan, and clearly were not average. They, naturally, could enter and leave the formation with ease, while the competitors were trapped by it. Other than shock, they also felt inspired. In terms of cultivation stages, there was only one stage between Ningmai and Jindan, but there was a vast difference in the power. For these Ningmai Xiuzha, becoming Jindan was their dream, but they knew how difficult it was. Ningmai could be considered the backbone of Sky Moon Jia, and only becoming Jindan would mean you were considered an expert. Each year, countless people were blocked by this gate, but no one would retreat. If they passed this gate, that was really like carp jumping over the dragon gate, and soaring sky high. After that, there was also a long lifespan. Everyone wanted to live longer. But right now they could only admire and be envious. They were young. Even though they had exceptional talent, their cultivation was shallow. In this 100 Xiuzha, there was only a few that had reached the middle levels of Ningmai, and increases in cultivation were harder the further it went. Achieving Jindan before the age of 50 was an extremely difficult accomplishment. Zuomo also heard the words of the judges, but at this time, he didn't have any thought of admiration. He almost started cursing. That judge had spoken without any warning, and frightened his hands into shaking, almost damaging the child formation he was setting up. Luckily, he forced Ling power in and managed to stabilize it. Everything inside the formation was under the cover of his consciousness. He naturally was clear that the Xiuzha had been attacked. This was just the beginning. But he didn't relax his hands. He could not spare any attention. There were still 6 child formations before he could complete the 72 Skyring Moonchime formations. Once he completed the 72 child formations, not only would the formation become more powerful, but the formation would gain an additional ability, control. He had controlled formations before, but those were only simple formations. He had never controlled such a complex and large formation. The difference between a formation that was controlled by a person and one that was not, was the distance between heaven and earth. Most importantly, if he could control such a big formation, it would be an extremely exhilarating experience. Inside the formation, those experts were not dumb and had their own calculations. Su bolstered her Ling power, the magnetic force forming an extremely small magnetic shell around her to protect her. Luli continued to wait for prey. Even though his void realm was suppressed in the big formation to a smaller area, But he was still motionless as his mind quickly pondered how to increase the size of his void realm in this formation. These two both were planning to defend and counterattack. One was in action, and the other was silent. Su frantically moved through the formation. Where was the damned guy hiding? And Chong Hung, he idly wandered through the formation in curiosity. The yellow-faced man behaved similarly to him. Gui Feng's movements were hard to follow, suddenly appearing and disappearing. Only Nan Menyang was still howling, each blow faster than the previous as he sliced at the rings of light. No one dared to come close to him. Seeing Nan Menyang's masculine and brutal demeanor combined with his fanatical expression, anyone that went near him would most likely get chopped down as well. Yu Bai was like a gust of wind, face dark as he searched for Nan Menyang's figure in the formation. It was strange. The formation was just a bit over 10 mu, but the people in the formation seemed to be in a vast wilderness. They could occasionally encounter another person, but the majority of the time, they could not. Compared to the ease of some of these Xiuzha, the fighting between the other Xiuzha in the formation was much more brutal. In the air above the big formation, the two judges idly talked, occasionally glancing at the formation. One of the judges was wearing a green Taoist robe, a cloth over his head. His name was Wu Ling Sanren. The other person was extremely imposing, wearing Ling armor. His name was Wei Fei, and one of the well-known experts in Sky Moon Jia. This Mo is really to my taste. What he's planning is the 72-child formation. Oh, he's pretty decisive. Wu Ling Sanren said, the setup of the formations might be very rough, but it still stuns me that he actually managed to finish this much, considering he's in Juji. Haha. Hearing this, Wei Fei teased. A pity that Pei Yuan ran and the others won't give this disciple to you. It is a pity. If he can learn from you for a few years, there probably wouldn't be anyone that could rival him in the younger generation in the field of formations. Wu Ling Sanren was one of those rare sword shio that was skilled in formations, which was why Wei Fei said what he did. Wu Ling Sanren shook his head. Such a talented disciple. Which sect would not treasure him? Between his words, he was extremely depressed. He had long wanted a disciple suited to him, but never found one. The disciples he had now, they did work hard to cultivate the sword, but had no interest in formations. His skill in formations was Wu Ling Sanren's proudest skill. Now that no one would inherit these skills from him, how could he not be bothered? If Wukong Sword Sect allowed Zhua Mo to enter his sect, he was willing to spend anything. But he also knew that was impossible. Even a normal sect wouldn't agree, much less Wukong Sword Sect that was aiming to recover its former glory. Ice Dragon Sword's reputation was not loud in the ears of normal Xiuzha of Sky Moon Jia, but to Jindan like him, Ice Dragon Sword's reputation was clear. Ah, Sanren is also troubled. This Zhua Mo will not enter another sect, but Wukong Sword Sect is definitely having a headache. Wei Fei's words were full of amusement. Wei Fei's words were accurate. Pei Yuan Ran felt an extreme migraine. Now that the situation was like this, he wasn't thinking about victory or defeat. In his perspective, victory did not matter, but how could he teach Zhua Mo? Undoubtedly, after this competition, Zhua Mo's fame in the field of formations would reach a new height. In their eyes, Zhua Mo had originally been a problematic youth, extremely hard to deal with. Now this problematic youth had become famous, very famous. Thinking that the sect would have a famous, wealthy, and extremely talented but problematic youth, Pei Yuan Ran felt like he was a mouse pulling a turtle, not knowing how to act. Right now he did not know that Zhua Mo was penniless. Zhua Mo had won such a large sum of Jingshi last time. Even a sect leader like Pei Yuan Ran would never ever dream that Zhua Mo would be so crazy as to spend it all. Zhua Mo's heart jumped. The formation was under great pressure. He hadn't thought that Nan Menyang would be so crazy, one blow after another. Each blow stronger than the previous. Does Ji have a disagreement with you? Zhua Mo was extremely furious. If this kept on going, this Skyring Moonchime formation would really quickly break under the brute force of this barbarian. He knew that he couldn't just set up formations again. If the formation broke, there was no meaning to him setting them up. Inside the Skyring Moonchime formation, Nan Menyang had really gotten into the swing of it. He had given 7 or 8 blows, but it did not look like there was any effect on the formation. His thought was extremely simple: if he hadn't broken this thing yet, then it was because he didn't use enough power. Nan Mengyang went completely crazy. The golden light on his body brightened. Under that thick golden light, even the large sword seemed to be covered with a tangible gold light. His hair standing on end, he looked like a furious golden lion. His eyes turned golden, staring at the rings of light above the sky. They seemed to have felt the danger from Nan Mengyang. The rings of light that had been swimming freely started to gather around Nan Mengyang's position. The presence that Nan Mengyang emitted was truly too strong, like the sun in the dark of the night. Yu Bai's black face became even darker as he spotted the light, a cold light flashing through his eyes. He unhesitatingly twisted his body and started to fly in the direction of Nan Mengyang. Feeling the battle intent and strong presence from Nan Mengyang, everyone understood his next attack would be extremely powerful. Oh, is the formation about to break? Zhong Mingyan thought with slight boredom. He swung the plum branch in his hand. Maybe he should go find an opponent. Who should he find? That Chang Heng seemed pretty strong. It wasn't just Zhong Mingyan that thought so. Nan Mengyang's presence was truly too astonishing that even a person as unconcerned as Chang Heng usually was couldn't help but change expression. Su's expression changed dramatically. It was over. The next attack that Nan Mengyang would give, even she wouldn't dare to meet it. Any Xiuzha inside the formation wouldn't dare to meet Nan Mengyang's blow. But if Zuemo lost her flying sword, the formation was going to break. Her heart was filled with hopelessness. Just at this time, a change suddenly occurred. Arr! An angry howl that could rival Nan Mengyang suddenly sounded inside the formation. A gigantic golden person with blurred features came down from the sky and landed heavily in front of Nan Mengyang. Seal Soldier! Nan Mengyang raised his golden eyes and grinned. He was completely sunken into a berserker rage. Anyone that appeared in front of him would be immediately torn to pieces. Die. A roar like that of a lion. Nan Mengyang's eyes glared angrily, the golden light on his body even brighter, as he swung his giant sword with both hands heavily at the seal soldier. Feeling the threat and battle intent from Nan Mengyang, the seal soldier revealed a pair of eyes among the blurred features. A pair of eyes filled with indifference and pressure. Countless seals that covered the armor of the seal soldier, like earthworms, suddenly light up. Its thick left leg heavily stomped, causing the ground to shake. Its right leg soundlessly moved back, the right fist moving in front of its body. Its lower half positioned like a bow, while the right fist was like a readied arrow waiting to be launched. It faced the golden sword energy, and released its punch. Born to battle. An authoritative and deep voice sounded out like thunder rolling through the clouds. A tangible golden light fist shot forth from its punch like a heavy hammer and thundered forth. Golden sword energy versus golden light fist. Chapter 148 Seal Soldier Bam. The deep reverberation of the collision seemed to beat on everyone's hearts. There was no explosion like they had imagined, no light blazing in all directions. The two balls of golden light had been like two flames colliding with each other and extinguishing at the same time. Nan Mengyang's entire body shuddered, the anger inside his golden pupils increasing slightly. He shouted, "Go die!" The golden light of the large sword in his hands was even brighter than before, and it was like a shining sun. In the blink of an eye, even the crescent moon over the large formation seemed to have lost its sheen and become dull. Mountain Breaker Sword. The tip of the sword started to tilt downwards. The howl from the golden sword tip slicing past air started from a nearly non-existent sound, and then suddenly, like a monster being torn apart, gave an extremely shrill shout. The completed sword energy of the golden sword was like a golden crescent moon, howling as it flew towards the seal soldier. The seals covering the body of the seal soldier became even brighter, like there were worms moving. On that blurred face, that pair of eyes became abnormally cold and distant, but its expression was indifferent as usual. Born to battle. The words were heavily enunciated out from the mouth of the seal soldier slowly and clearly, his leg moving as he prepared to punch. Another punch came. The golden light in the shape of a fist left its hand. The booming it created was like the lava roiling in the deep of the earth. It charged forward forcefully like it could not be blocked. Bam! It was another heavy and deep reverberation. The ground suddenly shook, also shaking people's hearts. Some Xiuzha that had been watching changed their expressions and started to fall back. Nan Menyang's gigantic figure shuddered again. The hairs that stood up on his head seemed to be blown by the wind restlessly. Both sword blows had been ineffective. The battle desire and the craziness in Nan Menyang's chest shot to its peak. The golden pupils started to burn as if they were two golden balls of fire. The golden light over his body started to retreat inwards. On his body, a thin, almost tangible and golden armor suddenly appeared. The thick golden energy that surrounded that gigantic sword in his hand spat and wavered like a flame, as though it felt the final battle had arrived. The bright seals on the silent seal soldier seemed to have come alive, like bugs that moved along the soldier's armor before quickly flowing towards the right fist it had beside its chest. The authoritative eyes of the seal soldier became even deeper, almost until it was a void, empty of everything. Go die. The angry roar was like a bolt of lightning. The blue-green mist around him suddenly exploded outward, with him at the center, clearing out one zhang of empty space. The power of one shout was extremely mighty. He slowly moved, creating a blow. There was not one speck of sound, but it was as though every muscle in Nan Menyang's body was following this sword. When the sword was just halfway through the air, a suffocating pressure pressed the ground into cracking. Born to battle. The deep voice was not loud, but it carried a different kind of power that directly pierced the heart. A resolute conviction was in these words, filling everyone's hearts. All the seals on the body flooded into its right fist. Its body became extremely dull. The entire body, other than the fist that was even brighter than before. The other part started to blur like it was golden mist that could dissipate at any time. Its action was the exact same as before. Step and then punch. A transparent fist exploded from its right fist. A fist that looked as though it was carved from clear crystal. The fist didn't hit Nan Menyang. When it was halfway there, when Nan Menyang's sword was in the midst of falling down, it suddenly exploded. Bam! This muffled sound was even deeper than the last two. But the Xiuzha who saw this fist in hand, and heard this muffled thunderous sound, couldn't help but shake. Bam bam bam. Nan Menyang went back 3 steps. The golden armor over his body became golden light again, his expression slightly wilted. Opposite him where the seal soldier had just been standing, there was nothing left. Good opponent. Nan Menyang might be slightly wilted but still couldn't help but shout in admiration. His eyes slightly regretful as he looked at the spot the seal soldier had disappeared. Just as this time, Yu Bai's furious voice that was full of hatred passed into Nan Menyang's ears. Nan Menyang, I'll kill you. In the corner of the Skyring Moonchime formation, Zuo spat out a mouthful of blood, startling to the eye when the bright red blood landed on the ground. He had been controlling the seal soldier. Nan Menyang's last blow far surpassed the limits of his tolerance. He had just been controlling the seal soldier to face Nan Menyang, yet he had been wounded in one blow. He couldn't help but feel deep awe at Nan Menyang's power. He wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth, expressionlessly baring his teeth. Barbarian. Go play with Little White. Forcibly controlling the turbulent Ling power in his body, he gritted his teeth and continued to set up formations. The Xiuzha inside the formation had been enchanted and deeply shocked by the 3 rounds between Nan Menyang and the seal soldier. It was a straightforward competition of only brute power. There was no technique, no dodging. Many people were awed. Nan Menyang's strength had been judged to be not bad, but due to the fact he was a grassroots cultivator, he was not judged very highly by other people. The great majority only believed that he would have a pretty good future. No one could have thought that he would have such terrifying power. Thinking about Nan Menyang looking like a god of war just moments ago, many people's hearts became slightly cold. But what was even more unexpected to them was another person, Zuo. Seal soldiers might be rare, but it couldn't enter the eyes of these people. The absolute majority of sword shio would snort at these kinds of seals. Of course, the crux of the matter was the power. In the seal soldiers they had seen before, not one had been so powerful. Most importantly, the person controlling this seal soldier was a Xiuzha in the stages of Zhuji. This upturned many of the fixed ideas in their heads. The difference between stages was not something that just a seal soldier could change. However, Zhuemo accomplished it. Even though he had just been on par for 3 moves, but in the eyes of everyone else, it was already a miracle. Up until now, the weakest competitor of the sword test conference still hadn't shown his face. This undoubtedly implied another bit of information. Zhuemo still had tricks left. The Great Formation still was unmoved. The rings of light that had gathered over Nan Menyang's head had all dissipated, moving around freely like they did before. Zhuemo's surprising performance attracted the interest of many people. Like Chang Heng. He had only found the formation interesting, which was why he entered. But Zhuemo's strong performance created great interest from him. He was very curious, just how far could Zhuemo go? It wasn't just him that had the thought. In the air, Wuling Sanren sighed gently in surprise. Not bad. To be able to meet Nan Menyang head-on 3 times, he used the seal soldier well. A strange light came into Wei Fei's eyes. His consciousness seems very large. That is rarely seen. Is Wukong's sword sect also skilled in cultivating the spirit? Without consciousness, he can't afford to play with formations. Wuling Sanren said, expression normal. That's true. Wei Fei nodded and said. Behind the black gauze, Su's little mouth almost couldn't close. The shock that the 3 rounds had given her was too strong. Different from other people, she had seen Wang Shixiang at Lingying's sect use the seal soldier when Zhuemo had gone to challenge Lingying's sect. It looked as though it was the same seal soldier, but the difference in power was drastic. She suspected that this seal soldier could even defeat 3 of the seal soldiers she saw last time. Maybe he really did have some moves, and didn't need her help. For the first time, she started to waver in her own thoughts. She suddenly remembered the words that Lin Qian Shixiang had said to her. A copper coin appeared in the hand that was hidden in her sleeve. At the center of a coin, an eye had been carved. The eye on the copper coin started to glow slightly. At the same time, the expression of the yellow-faced man slightly changed. His body became motionless. He seemed to have suddenly turned to a piece of rock, without any of the presence a person would have. The copper coin in Su's hand brightened, and then extinguished. The rock in Su's heart landed. Everything about Lin Shixiang was good, but he was just slightly paranoid. Up until now, she still didn't quite believe what Lin Shixiang had said. If it wasn't that Lin Shixiang had taken out her sex token, she probably would have already attacked him. Just now someone used Fire Eye again. Puyao suddenly came out. Zhuemo didn't have the time to pay attention to him. As long as you remain silent, no one can find you. You seem to have encountered trouble. Puyao asked in interest. In his eyes, Zhuemo was afraid of death, and always put his own security at the most important position. He hadn't ever saw Zhuemo respond like. So when he was discussing the problem of safety with Zhuemo, this group of people is pouring salt onto the wound. Zhuemo gritted through his teeth, his hands not slowing. You want to give your all against them? Puyao clearly was laughing at his misfortunes. Zhuemo was too lazy to pay attention to this perverse Renyao who had nothing to do. You have the Yao seed. Why don't you try to use the Yao seed to manipulate the consciousness and control the formation? Puyao kindly suggested. Use the Yao seed to manipulate the consciousness and control the formation? Zhuemo reflexively shook his head. The Skyring Moonchime formation needs all 72 child formations to be completed before it can be controlled. You don't just have the Skyring Moonchime formation. Puyao said disapprovingly. Right. Why hadn't he thought of that? Zhuemo felt his vision light up. He had made a great misunderstanding. All of his mind had been thinking about completing the 72 child formation, Skyring Moonchime formation, and completely forgot that he hadn't just set up the formations for Skyring Moonchime formation. This was an extremely large-scale formation belt. Actually, other than increasing the rate your consciousness grows, the Yao seed's other use is splitting your mind. Puyao was strangely good today. It was extremely rare that he would take the initiative and teach Zhuemo without Zhuemo needing to pay Jingshi. Splitting my attention? Zhuemo irritably rolled his eyes. At this time, you want me to split my attention? The so-called splitting the mind is referring to splitting your consciousness into several parts. all of them working at the same time on their own matters. Pu Yao said faintly. The great majority of Yao will split this consciousness, and some Yao are born with this ability. Truly powerful Yao are able to split their consciousness into thousands of portions, and are peerlessly strong. But at this time, Zuoyamo completely did not think about why Pu Yao was so strange today. He was shocked by Pu Yao's words. It was like a bolt of lightning hitting his mind. Consciousness splitting. If he split his consciousness and they all did their own things at once. Up until now, he had always thought of the consciousness as one whole entity, and had never thought about splitting the consciousness to do different things at once. He suddenly thought of Ling power. Ling power could break off and merge. Was the consciousness like Ling power as well, able to be broken up and merged together? If it really was possible. Zuomo's hands, which hadn't stopped since the beginning, suddenly stopped in the air. Chapter 149. Fire. Watching Yu Bai and Nan Menyang embroiled in battle, no one could look away. Just having gone 3 rounds, Nan Menyang was completely suppressed by Yu Bai, unable to lift his head under the blows. Yu Bai didn't use his usual style of fighting, instead each blow was vicious, decisive, and aimed to kill, causing a chill to creep into the hearts of everyone watching inside the formation. When a composed person was angry, it was very frightening. Probably the only person that found it boring was Chang Heng. This level of fighting and killing, it really couldn't alert his mind. He scanned the surroundings. Everyone had stopped their actions. The 3 rounds between Nan Menyang and the Seal Soldier had shaken the skies, and attracted almost all the Xiuzha inside the formation. Right now, the fight between Nan Menyang and Yu Bai was not as blood-rousing as the previous fight, but the technique was no less spectacular. One had a grassroots background with no family or sect, the other the beloved disciple of the ruler of Dongfu. Once the two really became serious, the scene was amazingly spectacular, the spectators becoming intoxicated. Without detecting it, all the Xiuzha inside the formation had gathered together again. Chang Heng raised his head to look at the rings of light swimming in the air and the crescent moon high up, his expression slightly moved. He took away his gaze because he noticed, not far away, Zhong Mingyan was looking at him. Their gazes met midair, striking like 2 extremely sharp swords, sparks flying. 2 stubborn and proud young experts exchanged a look. Fight! Zhong Mingyan opened coldly, his gaze full of challenge. Not interested. Chang Heng only glanced at Zhong Mingyan before moving his eyes back towards the sky. The rings of light that were freely swimming in the air seemed to be more attractive for him. Zhong Mingyan's eyes slightly shrunk, but he didn't make another challenge. Chang Heng's viciousness and brutality was the greatest in the sword test conference. Every competitor, when they faced this brute, couldn't help but shrink inwards, including Zhong Mingyan. Zhong Mingyan's expression turned back to normal as he said faintly, "Why don't we use the breaking of the formation to wager victory and defeat?" Chang Heng's face was still upraised, not looking at Zhong Mingyan even once, as he said, "Oh, I'm afraid you might not even break it." Zhong Mingyan could clearly feel Chang Heng's low opinion, and his expression was extremely ugly. He snorted coldly, "You may be underestimating me a little too much. You could try." Chang Heng pointed at the sky, and said face normal. Hearing this, Zhong Mingyan was too lazy to respond to Chang Heng. The 7-plum sword appeared in his hand. A shake of the wrist, and 3 plum flowers turned to 3 streams of light that flew into the sky. Zhong Mingyan wanted Chang Heng to see his strength, so his first move was his most accomplished, 3 play. 3 sword essences were like 3 slinking fish as they circled around and shot at the crescent moon in the sky. Zuoyamo had been pondering how to split his consciousness when he suddenly detected an abnormality in the formation, and instantly woke up. Fuck, would they never stop? Having just made a tiny bit of headway, Zuoyamo was so angry he swore. When he found the person responsible was Zhong Mingyan, the anger in his heart shot upwards. He remembered. This guy was the first person that had made trouble. It was an anger that came from the chest, and hate from the gallbladder. Zuomo's anger erupting from his heart, instantly sunk into his second rage. Geez, long found this guy an eyesore. Zuomo's eyes were green. The two hands that had stopped started again. He finally understood. Given the time and place, it wasn't the moment good time to ponder about how to split his consciousness. These people that had poured salt onto the wound might all be terribly evil, but each of them had the power to damage the formation. If he couldn't complete the 72-child formation, Skyring Moonchime formation, he couldn't do anything to them. Without him detecting it, he had started to think of ways to deal with the experts inside the formation. He completely forgot that each person in there had power that far surpassed him. However, Zuemo was facing the same difficult problem as before. He must, before he could complete the 72-child formation, Skyring Moonchime formation, stop these people from damaging it. The 72-child formations were just on the edge of completion, and these people had come out again to make a mess. Just now, he had used up the seal soldier to stop Nan Mingyang from breaking the formation. Now what could he use to stop Zhong Mingyan from breaking the formation? Did you think Ji only had a seal soldier? Zuemo gritted his teeth as he cursed Zhong Mingyan inside 100 times. But at the same time, his consciousness silently flowed forth like a stream of water. His body slightly leaned forward, his back curved. He looked like a curved bow from far away. He maintained this strange position without moving. Only his eyes slightly narrowed like a hunter waiting for his prey. Zhong Mingyan's 3 sword essences were like piranhas that landed in a rich swarm of fish. Any ring of light that tried to come near the sword essences were instantly sliced to pieces. The 3 spiraling sword energies did not look like they were affected at all. Carrying a hiss that could shock souls, they headed straight for the crescent moon in the sky. In his eyes, that bright moon was clearly the crux to breaking the formation. If he could destroy the moon, the entire formation would be solved. The layers of light rings were like a thick coat, unable to be damaged by knife or axe. But if a narrow needle was pushed, it could easily pierce through this layer of cloth. The 3 sword energies did not stop their spinning, forming a sharp cutting formation. Each sword energy was like the sharpest blade, its penetrating power far surpassing normal sword energies. The rings of light that had blocked his one cut plum were easily penetrated when faced with this 3 play. The sword energies were as fast as lightning, nothing that the rings of light could catch up to. But the rings of light seemed to be alive. Knowing they couldn't block the sword energies, they headed towards Zhong Mingyan. Ring after ring of light landed from the sky, heading to cover Zhong Mingyan. Even as powerful as Zhong Mingyan was, he didn't easily experiment. Everyone had a deep impression of the Xiuzha that was eliminated. Paired sparrow flying. 2 plum flowers fell off the plum branch like 2 butterflies, flying around Zhong Mingyan. Once the rings of light came at Zhong Mingyan from the sky, a clear cracking sound could be heard before they were blown to pieces, turning into countless scattered energies. However, the rings of light did not give up moving towards Zhong Mingyan. Clink, clink, clink. The dense crisp sounds were like hundreds of glass cups being smashed at once. The broken energies fell and floated around Zhong Mingyan, and then were blown away by the winds created by the 2 plum flowers. Amidst the broken energies, Zhong Mingyan was unharmed. Young people really have energy. The yellow-faced male had appeared at some time beside Chong Hung and snickered. Chong Hung still was looking at the sky, and responded indifferently, "He's dumb." "Hehe, that's good. It will let us save some energy." The yellow-faced man smiled and said. Chong Hung heard this, and turned to look at the yellow-faced male. "Who are you searching for?" "Searching for?" The yellow-faced man seemed to not understand. "Your strength is greater than anyone here." Chong Hung said faintly. "Hiding your strength, not competing for a rank, you naturally have other goals. You've been constantly running here and there, and look as though you are trying to find something. This is Great Pine Pavilion. I've never heard there was anything good there. That means there is only one possibility, you are trying to find someone." The smile on the yellow-faced male's face disappeared, his eyes gradually turning sharp as a knife. Chong Heng's face was as indifferent as usual. The yellow-faced man suddenly clapped his hands and smiled. "Others only know you for your viciousness and bloodthirst. No one would think you have such a mind for details. I underestimated you. We do not have a conflict." Chong Hung, from beginning to end, had a calm expression as though he was speaking of something that had no bearing on him. The yellow-faced man lightly sighed. Not here. He could not disguise the disappointment. That's a pity. Changheng said, face calm. But he didn't say why it was a pity. In Zuomo's sea of consciousness, Pu sat on the gravestone, his eyes looking into the distance. There was a mirth floating at the corner of his mouth that was somewhat hard to decipher. It seemed slightly scornful, slightly reminiscent, slightly lonely, slightly cold. Different from Pu Yao, who was as steady as Mount Tai. Zuo was like the arrow that was on the thread that would sever at a touch. That crescent moon might not be the cover door, but if it was attacked, Zuo also knew what would happen. The time did not allow him to think more. 3 blue lights that were like chains suddenly appeared. Dragon tying formation. The position the blue chains appeared were extremely precise, exactly on the path that the spiraling sword energies would pass. Different than the dragon tying formation that Zuo had used before. Once the 3 blue chains appeared, they knotted into a clasp that could perfectly restrain the 3 sword energies. The 3 sword energies headed straight into the clasp. The strength of the clasp far surpassed Zhong Mingyan's expectations. It didn't break. Just as Zhong Mingyan paused, a web of fire suddenly appeared in the sky. An enormous, dense and deep blue web of fire. The 7 greenwood flags absorbed the water power, continuously turning it into wood power. Beside each greenwood flag, there were 7 second-grade little copper lion head cauldrons. Deep red flames spat out from the mouth of the lion heads on the copper lion head cauldrons and gathered in the air. After gathering, the redness of the flames became fainter. Around each of the 7 cauldrons, with 12 jade cards as bone, and the red gold thread as the channels, it formed a 3-turn fire formation. After 3 turns, the fire was almost completely clear. 7 near-transparent flames flew in the sky, crisscrossing in the air. The 7 by 749 little Dan cauldrons formation, a greatly fire formation. Once the formation formed, each string of fire shook. The nearly transparent flames changed again, and became tinged with a slightly tranquil blue. This was the enormous tranquil blue web of fire that everyone saw up in the air. The tranquil blue web of fire perfectly blocked the 3 sword energies and Zhong Mingyan. Zhong Mingyan's expression slightly changed. This web of fire had actually cut the connection between him and the 3 sword energies. At the same time, the blue dragon tying chains that was around the 3 sword energies suddenly pulled and swung towards the side. Bam! In the end, the blue dragon tying chains was not able to stop the 3 combined sword essences, and was shred into pieces. But with this pull and swing, the aim of the 3 sword essences diverged. They brushed past that crescent moon, entering the air and disappeared. Everyone was shocked still by the fire web that suddenly appeared over their heads. The tranquil blue threads of fire were silent. It was like there was an enormous and tranquil blue spiderweb over their heads. But many of them did not pale because of the thick tranquil blue fire threads. Instead, the terrifying heat that was released startled everyone. The flame was tranquil blue. How high would its temperature reach? The tranquil blue web of fire freely burned on. The interior of the formation had become an enormous Dan cauldron. In the air, Wuling Sanren and Wei Fei saw this extremely awe-inspiring scene. The moisture of the half-moose-sized pond roiled, abnormally lively. They turned to streams of water power, continuously flooding into the greenwood flag masts. The green and silent wood energy entered the copper lion head cauldrons, turning into deep red fire power. Then through the 3-turn fire formation, it then entered the greatly fire formation, and knotted into a web. Wei Fei stared with wide eyes, muttering to himself. Uncanny workmanship. Godly technique. Chapter 150. New target. Zuo was in a predicament. Bean-sized beads of sweat flowed down his face. He had underestimated the difficulty of controlling this greatly fire seal formation. To pursue power, he had done his best to strengthen the formation from every aspect. The direct result was the difficulty in controlling the formation had also increased. Behind the spectacular display, the series of manipulations he had done were all highly difficult. Even though Zuomo's skill and control had increased, the unexpected difficulty of controlling the formation had created a great problem for him. His body shook like dice. In a short moment, sweat suddenly started to appear on his body. In a moment he appeared to have been just dunked in water. It was too hard. Damn it. Zhuo cautiously began using all of his consciousness to control every tiny change in the formation. Formations were a kind of work that demanded meticulousness. Any kind of mistake could create an extremely large effect, and cause the effect of the formation to vary drastically. The complexity of a formation belt, that was composed of many kinds of formations that were maximized for effect, was even more so. Zhuo did not notice that he had bitten through his lips, and blood was seeping out. His consciousness was using the 5-colored pagoda to carefully control the web of fire. Having finally stopped Zhong Mingyan's attack, Zhuo didn't have the time to rejoice. He had reached his limits. The web of fire was almost out of control. Zhuo's eyes widened into circles, the tendons in his forehead pulsing. If he lost control of the fire web, for him that meant failure. The temperature of the tranquil blue fire was the strongest flame that he had ever seen since he learned dan-making. The uncontrolled fire web would collapse in an instant, and the flowing tranquil blue fire would destroy all of the formations. That was definitely not allowed. But he had reached the last of his endurance. He could feel the Ling power in his body quickly depleting. His weak cultivation once again became his Achilles heel. However, he had no time to think about this right now. He had to make a choice. He didn't even pause to think. Grunting, he gathered the last of his power. The gigantic tranquil blue fire suddenly pushed downwards. The xiuzha in the formation below instantly moved. Did Zhuo want to get them all at once? He didn't know his power. A cold smile appeared on the corner of many of the xiuzha's mouths. From their perspective, a Zhuji xiuzha was sending them a challenge through this method. These people whose eyes were always looking upwards, how could they bear a Zhuji looking down at them? Many competitors were preparing eagerly to try to test the power of the web of fire. Just at this time, a deep and raspy sound suddenly echoed through the formation. Bind! The web of fire that had covered the sky suddenly shrunk extremely, heading for Zhong Mingyan. This caused the xiuzha that had prepared to fight to pause. They instantly revealed expressions of anticipation to see the result. No one would be dumb to block the web of fire for Zhong Mingyan. Anger came onto Zhong Mingyan's face. He gave a heavy snort. His expression serious. The 7-plumb sword in his hand turned to a flash of dark light that headed for the web of fire. As the 7-plumb sword entered the air, it turned to a gigantic sword energy, forcefully piercing the net. The tranquil blue fire web unexpectedly shrunk again, actually taking along the sword and person to the middle of the web. When the sword energy sliced the web of fire, Zhuo spat out a handful of blood again, his face becoming even paler. But did the situation allow him to retreat? He suddenly bit the tip of his tongue, the salty and fishy taste of blood making his mind alert. He suddenly pushed out his last bit of power. His spiritual and Ling power was almost empty at this time. Zhuo was bleeding from his nose and mouth, but he did not detect it. The last bit of consciousness burrowed into the 5-colored pagoda. The 5-colored pagoda suddenly burst in light. Under the crescent moon, it flashed with 5-colored light. Zhong Mingyan's expression finally changed. The web of fire had not neared him, but the rising temperature was already enough for him to feel fear. He didn't dare to hold anything back. He jumped into the air, closely following the flying sword. All his Ling power was channeled into the flying sword. There was only one thought in his mind. Break out of this web of fire. Using all his power, the sword essence of the 7-plumb sword suddenly was as sharp as the cold wind at the top of a cliff. Suddenly, it was like there was an old winter plum standing in the wind. The flying sword broke through the fire web. Zhong Mingyan felt joy, but just at this time, a change occurred. Die! Zhuo's muffled shout was like thunder, rolling and exploding inside the formation. The web of fire suddenly retreated inwards to the center. Zhong Mingyan felt that the tranquil blue flame was all around him, as though he was inside a large Dan cauldron, and would turn to ash at any instant. Fear in his heart, he hurriedly activated the Ling armor. Countless tranquil blue flames landed on Zhong Mingyan's body. Ah! Zhong Mingyan shrieked, the light of the flying sword suddenly becoming disordered. Just as everyone assumed that Zhong Mingyan would lose his life, the countless tranquil blue flames suddenly disappeared. Yet there were still many flames that had landed on Zhong Mingyan's Ling armor. Dongqi sword sect was not famous for its defense. The power of these tranquil blue flames were astounding. Even with the protection of the Ling armor, Zhong Mingyan was in terrible straits. His entire body was burnt black, Ling armor completely damaged. He was like a piece of wood burnt black, dropping from the sky. The other Xiuzha inside the formation all inhaled in shock. Who was the person dropping down? It was Zhong Mingyan. This formation was truly too strong. Even Zhong Mingyan had been defeated. The Xiuzha that had wanted to try solving the formation instantly stopped in their tracks. When they saw the unconscious Zhong Mingyan, and the terrible state of his body as he laid on the ground, they really didn't bear to look at him. Holy moly! Even Zhong Mingyan wasn't a match. Was this formation really just something a Zhuji had made? The same question flowed through every Xiuzha inside the formation. Zuemo hadn't put all of his effort in at the end. If he hadn't stopped, then all of the tranquil blue flames would have bombarded Zhong Mingyan. It would have been hard to say if Zhong Mingyan would have managed to survive. In other words, the formation that Zuemo set up was able to kill a Ningmai Xiuzha. Everyone jumped in fright. In one moment, all the Xiuzha that had been fighting in the formation completely stopped attacking each other. A serious expression came onto their faces. They were still inside the formation. But what they didn't realize was that Zuemo had no intentions of letting the Zhong Mingyan off. At the end, even his mind had been blurred. How would he know when to stop? All of his spiritual and Ling power had been used up. He had fainted, which was what had caused the flames to disappear. When Zuemo slowly woke up from unconsciousness, the desire for battle and courage had long ago flew into the horizons. As expected, the ignorant had no fear. Just now he had actually been locked in combat directly with Zhong Mingyan. He suddenly tilted his head. He remembered now. Before he had fainted, he had actually defeated Zhong Mingyan. He grinned, but with his expressionless face, it looked extremely strange. How long had he been unconscious? He struggled to get up, looking at the surroundings. He was still inside the formation? The people still hadn't solved the formation? Zuemo felt that this was extremely absurd. Even now, he still found it hard to accept that he had just defeated Zhong Mingyan. Zuemo didn't know that he had just been unconscious for the time of an incense stick. This was due to his extremely deep practice of Vajra Profound Sutra. If he didn't practice that, it would have been many days until he would wake up. And he would never have predicted that in the time that he had been unconscious, no one tried to break the formation. It was the opposite. The Xiuzha in the formation started to attack other people, no matter if it was Su or Gui Feng. Even Chang Heng had entered the fight. The other people started to clean up the other Xiuzha inside the formation. Wu Ling Sanren and Wei Fei had started to get busy. Chang Heng and the others were acting out of caution. They had just seen the power of the formation. No one dared to be careless. To solve the formation, they had to put in all their power. But if there were opponents beside them, who would dare to give their all? If Zuemo thought of all this, he would definitely feel proud of himself. A cultivator just in Juji that made so many Ningmai wary and put them on the defensive. It was enough to be proud. However, Zuemo had just woken up and his gaze had landed on the incomplete, Skyring Moonchime formation. In reality, while it looked like he had won the battle against Zhong Mingyan, but in reality, he had accomplished it through self-harm. The wounds he had received when controlling the seal soldier to face Nan Menyang had worsened, and he completely lost the power to keep fighting. So unprofitable. The first thought that popped into Zuomo's mind was this. Looking at these Skyring Moonchime child formations, the pain in his heart reached a peak, far more painful than the pain from his physical body. So many Jingshi were wasted. He had bought all of these materials from the 100 Treasures Flying Pavilion in order to attend this competition. He felt like he had taken a large sum of Jingshi and made an extremely incorrect investment. It looked like he hadn't gained anything at all and lost everything. No, definitely not. Zuemo gritted his teeth and sat up. He had to finish the 72 child formation, Skyring Moonchime formation. He wasn't thinking of the Kunlun Jade Scroll. His actions were just to not waste all the materials he had already used. He had spent so many materials, he had to hear a sound from them. As he endured the pain, Zuemo comforted himself so. Right now he completely did not have any energy to continue, so he sat down and meditated. He needed to quickly recover his ling and spiritual power. Otherwise he wouldn't even get to hear a sound. Consequently, an extremely strange scene appeared. Zuemo was safely meditating in the formation to recover ling and spiritual power, while Changheng and the others were engaged in fierce combat inside the formation. The other Xiuzhe might not be as good as the experts, but the ones that dared to enter the formation were not ordinary in their power. These Xiuzhe were not stupid. They instantly knew what Changheng and the others intended, and naturally would not wait to be eliminated. If one person couldn't win, then two of them would fight together. Amidst the shouts, the howls of the flying swords, the bangs and crashes, Zuemo silently meditated. 45 minutes later, he finally opened his eyes. In possession of the Mo matrix and Yao seed, he recovered ling and spiritual power. With the exception of Pu Yao, he had never encountered a Xiuzhe that could recover faster than himself. Yet even in this little span of time, only 5 people were left remaining in the formation. Su Guifeng, Changheng, the yellow-faced man, Luo Li. Yu Bai and Nan Menyang had fought too hard and expended too much energy. It could be said that both of them had lost. They had been tricked by Changheng and the yellow-faced man working together. As for the other people, they had been eliminated even earlier on. The pitiful Zhong Mingyan had been saved by Wu Ling Sanren a long time ago. Zuemo did not attend to the 5 people. Pushing down his wounds, he kept on setting up the Skyring Moonchime formation. The target that he gave himself right now was extremely realistic. Finish the 72-child formation, Skyring Moonchime formation. If he couldn't get the Jade Scroll, he'd get experience. Chapter 151. Comprehension. Su suddenly moved next to Luo Li. Luo Li silently put up his guard. You are Zuemo Xixiang. Su decided she would do it herself. Up until now, that soft rice zombie still hadn't responded at all. The soft rice zombie might not care about victory, but she had to. Luo Li made a sound in surprise. One for each of us. Su spoke very quickly. I pick Guifeng. Luo Li was even more surprised. Was she Zuemo's friend? Was it true or false? His brain moved quickly, balancing the advantages and disadvantages. He was still on his guard, but his mouth did not hesitate in saying, Okay, I picked the yellow-faced one. Even if he could not judge the sincerity, but from every angle, there was no detriment to him. The two split apart. The other 3 people clearly heard the words between the 2 people. Changheng was not affected. The yellow-faced male smiled. Guifeng vanished where he stood. Everyone was extremely cooperative, each person finding a place to fight. Only Changheng was left at the original spot, raising his head to look at the rings of light, sinking into his thoughts. Zuemo didn't pay attention to what was happening in the formation. After making a decision, he didn't move from it. The wounds on his body were greatly affecting him. When he channeled Ling power, there would be a bit of a pause. Ever since he had started practicing embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, it had been a long time since he had tasted the pain of spiritual wounds. But in the last 2 fights, even his most skilled consciousness could not avoid being injured. This was the result of fighting a battle that crossed stages. Even if he managed to use the formation as help, he still could not avoid being injured. However, on the surface, no one would think that his channels and internal organs were wounded. His gaze was concentrated and calm, clear and serene without a stray thought. The finger movements were not lightning fast as before, but it was still flowing, and gave onlookers another kind of beauty. In the air, Wu Ling Sanren couldn't help but exclaim, This boy would definitely accomplish great things. Wei Fei also had an expression of admiration. With Juji cultivation, to be able to block 3 full-force blows from Nan Menyan, to seriously wound Zhong Mingyan, he has enough to be proud. The heavens really have heavily blessed Wukong sword sect. One Wei Sheng, one Zuemo, There will be no worries for 100 years. For some reason, Wuling Sanren suddenly sighed. Such a pity they are not born at the right time. When the nest is attacked, would any egg escape? Such talent, if they fall early, it would be a pity. Wei Fei roared in laughter. I have the opposite opinion from Sanren. It is because they have outstanding talent that they need to undergo more grinding. Heroes are born in troubled times. Without troubled times, it is rare to see heroes. Hearing this, Wuling Sanren said, self-mockingly, Brother Wei is right. I'm old now. Without a stray thought on his mind, or desire for victory, Zhuo was extremely calm. The speed that he made formations increased greatly without his own knowledge. He seemed to not have to think, and the materials would flow past from his fingers. The spells naturally cast, everything smooth and flowing. In a short time, the 72-child formation, Skyring Moonchime formation, actually was completed. He dazedly looked at the big formation, and he seemed to be in slight disbelief, yet was also slightly thoughtful. In this short amount of time, he seemed to have experienced very much. A hard fight, receiving serious wounds, fainting and then waking up, all of this caused his mood to go from shaking to peaceful. In the beginning he was filled with anticipation, the desire for victory, only to have his hopes dashed. He was left with only the desire to wound the enemies. Finally he was forced to focus on only one thing, to exclude all other thoughts and not think about victory. He stood dazedly inside the formation, motionless like a statue. On the top of the main peak, the battle between Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping was still ongoing. Wei Sheng's vision was a sea of blood blurred. There were countless sword wounds on his body. The bleeding was dyeing his clothing. His features were blurred. He looked as though he was a person made from blood. Many in the audience that were watching almost couldn't bear to keep watching at this time. Even Tian Songzi hadn't resisted coming over and asking if he should stop the battle. Pei Yuan Ran did not stop the fight, but he didn't realize that inside his tight fist, his fingernails had deeply cut into the flesh. Gu Rongping wasn't in good shape either. There were 3 sword cuts on his body. The 3 sword cuts were not deep, but the fresh blood had dyed a patch on his chest. His sword essence was still as free and traceless as before, but the audience could easily detect his exhaustion. No one would feel that Gu Rongping didn't have enough power. After fighting so hard for such a long period of time, exhaustion was an extremely normal state. Gu Rongping knew his own situation was worsening as time flowed, but he had no solution. 2 hours ago, Wei Sheng had been covered in wounds, almost wavering. But after 2 hours, Wei Sheng was still persisting. He seemed as though he could collapse at any moment, but he did not. Every time, Gu Rongping would feel that if he just put in a bit more power, he could defeat Wei Sheng. But after he put in the power, he found that, other than leaving behind a sword mark on the other's body, he didn't accomplish anything. Wei Sheng still endured. He hadn't managed to wait for Wei Sheng to collapse. Yet Gu Rongping found that he had sunk into a dilemma without being aware of it. The 3 sword marks on his body were the proof. His sword scripture was like unspun silk from a cocoon, setting up a large web to snare the other, and then slowly wear away at the strength of his opponent, to let them lose all room to breathe and die. He had successfully pinned down his opponent, but his opponent had not stopped struggling. The 2 sides entered a standoff. The other's hardiness had far surpassed his expectations. His Ling power had quickly been consumed. His sword energies had slowly lost their edge. His movements started to become slower. The other had caught on to his weakness and counterattacked. The longer he fought, the heavier the terror in Gu Rongping's heart grew. Wei Sheng was like a wild beast that did not know exhaustion, like a seal soldier that did not have life, and did not know pain. When the sword energy flashed past his body, other than a muffled grunt, other than seeing the spray of blood, there was no other observable signs that he was affected. The fight between the hunter and the wild beast, the hunter was gradually losing the advantage. Zhuomo's formation belt allowed people to see a spectacle, and made people feel surprise. Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping's battle made people feel awe that came deep from their hearts. Time slowly slipped by. The sound of discussion became increasingly quieter. Even more people felt they were unable to keep watching. Seeing a person entirely covered in blood, fighting without a sound as he struggled painstakingly, and flying through the air as his figure wavered. The blood that was flowing down his body flung into the air. No one was in the mood to speak. Even though Wei Sheng had not won, but in everyone's eyes there was only his blood-covered figure. The battle inside the Great Pine Pavilion was still continuing. The Skyring Moonchime formation had attracted the majority of the experts. Many people had cheered as they assumed their chances of entering the top 10 would increase. However, the developments were completely the opposite of what they imagined. Without the pressure of the experts, many Xiuzhe that had decided to hide themselves did not have pressure and lost their patience. They did not hide in the corners any longer. The combat became even more fierce. However, no one dared to near Skyring Moonchime formation, and no one dared to near the main peak. The Skyring Moonchime formation was like a mysterious beast, its bloody maw wide open. No one knew the situation inside it. The fierce fight on top of the main peak made many Xiuzhe inside the Great Pine Pavilion feel terror, deep terror. Even the judges in the Great Pine Pavilion put their attentions on those two places, and wished all the other fights would instantly finish. Zuomo felt that he seemed to have dropped into an enormous gray bubble. All around him was full of a strange gray material, even though he was wearing Ling armor, but the Ling armor did not separate him from the gray matter. He seemed to be swimming naked. It didn't seem warm, but it wasn't cold. It was a strange sensation. The only feeling he could describe was familiar. He seemed to be very familiar with this gray material. What was this gray material? He seemed to understand everything, but did not understand anything at all. He reached out to grab, but didn't catch anything. Where was this? What was it? He felt that he should know, but no matter how he thought, he could not remember. He was slightly stunned. The surroundings did not provide any hints to him. His only clue was the feeling of familiarity. What really was this? Zuomo couldn't help furrowing his brows as he started to think deeply. He felt that he needed to find the answer. He reflexively reached and grasped at the gray material. Same as last time, he didn't grasp anything. This material was like air, invisible and intangible. Zuomo thought inside. Wait, invisible and intangible. Zuomo suddenly jumped. He knew what this was. Consciousness. This was consciousness. The moment he told himself this was consciousness, the feeling of familiarity inside his body instantly grew stronger. At the same time, the scenery around him suddenly changed. Below him, there was a place that looked like a little island far away. There was a patch of flame on the little island, countless crimson flames dancing, a gravestone, and a male wearing black sitting on top. There was also a ruler-straight river. The river was very muddled, with two kinds of colors that could barely be made out. Sea of Consciousness. This was the Sea of Consciousness. Zuomo was very shocked when he saw Pu Yao on top of the gravestone. He couldn't help but shout, but no matter how hard he tried to shout, Pu Yao did not hear him. He had to give up, and started to scan the surroundings. The entire Sea of Consciousness was surrounded by this gray material. This was completely different than what Zuomo had thought before. In the Sea of Consciousness in his memories, what he saw in the surroundings was a pitch-black void, without anything but the stars in the sky. Right. He remembered that there were 4 stars in the void. As expected, when he raised his head to look up, he saw the stars. There were 4 stars in the sky. One of them was the brightest, the other 3 slightly duller. Before, every time he entered the Sea of Consciousness, he felt the 4 stars were very distant. At this time, he found that the 4 stars were like 4 little boats, floating on the outside of the consciousness. He seemed to have comprehended something. At this time, the 4 stars suddenly started to shed starlight. The starlight was like silver sand, slowly absorbed into the gray consciousness. But the gray consciousness was too big. That bit of starlight was pitifully small. But the 4 stars continuously poured down starlight at a slow pace. Zuomo didn't know what was the use of these silver-grain starlight, but clearly his consciousness seemed to be starting a kind of transformation. Wei Fei and Wu Ling Sanren were absorbed in the fight between Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping. Not just them, but all of the judges in the Great Pine Pavilion were watching this tragic fight. Suddenly, Wu Ling Sanren seemed to have detected something, and turned his face. He unconsciously looked at the large formation under his feet. Just one look, and his gaze was stuck. Inside the formation, Zuomo's arms were spread open like he was going to embrace something. He was woodenly standing on the spot, his eyes empty and lifeless. Around him, the air seemed like burning firewood, occasionally producing soft explosions. Chapter 152. Stardust. The explosions around Zuomo became even dense. With the naked eye, it was possible to see the air continuously exploding and producing small whirlpools. Wuling Sanren was skilled in formations. Because of this, his consciousness was strong. Yet he found when his consciousness was one zhang away from Zuomo, it seemed to have touched a wall that he could not penetrate. He made a sound of surprise. He was in the stage of Jindan. Zuomo was just in Juji. Theoretically, Zuomo's consciousness was not something that could resist his own. But the present situation was he was blocked. This kind of situation usually happened only when both sides were similar in power. He quickly calmed down from his surprise. He guessed that Zuomo's consciousness was undergoing a transformation. The explosions around Zuomo made him even more certain of his prediction. Compared to Ling power, Xiozha understood much less about the spirit. Even Jindan Xiozha like Wuling Sanren wouldn't dare to say they had a good understanding of the spirit. On the market, there were countless jade scrolls on cultivating Ling power, but the number of jade scrolls for cultivating spiritual power were pitifully small, and they were not in demand. It was the most unpopular of the unpopular. In all the Xiozha, most of those skilled in the spirit were formation Xiao, but even formation Xiao still primarily used Ling power. It was like the Diana. They called themselves the greatest at body cultivation, but in reality, they still cultivated Ling power primarily. Wuling Sanren might be skilled in formations, but he wasn't a formation Xiao, but a sword Xiao. In such a backwater little Jia like Sky Moon Jia dominated by sword Xiao, how was it possible to find good scriptures for cultivating the spirit? Wuling Sanren's spirit scripture was a small branch of his sex scripture. Due to that, he became interested in formations and cultivated it for a while. But that was just his hobby. A sword Xiao could only have one job, that was, to cultivate the sword. Wuling Sanren did not know what was really happening in Zuomo's spirit. Wei Fei, who had been alarmed by Wuling Sanren's sound, looked at Zuomo once before he took away his gaze. He was also a Jindan and naturally could see that a transformation was taking place in Zuomo's consciousness. But in his view, the spirit was not the true path. So what if one's spirit was powerful? Wuling Sanren thought for a while. Not being able to come to any answers, he turned his eyes back to Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping. Zuomo felt his consciousness silently start to change as the starlight penetrated. But what change was it? Looking at the starlight continuously produced by the stars slowly spread out in his consciousness, he had a feeling that this transformation would continue for a time. The speed that the starlight spread was very slow. If it needed to spread through all of the area that the consciousness occupied, the time needed was not short. His gaze leaving the consciousness, he started to ponder the consciousness splitting that Pu Yao told him. In front of him, the consciousness was so clear. This was the first time that he had seen his consciousness. He didn't know if this was an illusion or his own delusion. He felt it was hard to decipher, so he didn't think about it. Because the consciousness was so close he could almost touch it, he naturally thought about consciousness splitting. Pu Yao did not tell him how to separate the consciousness. Zuomo looked at the surroundings. All around him was the consciousness, like the endless gray matter. The sea of consciousness was enveloped at the very center of the consciousness. The stars floated on the outside of the consciousness. It was so large, yet shapeless and intangible. Zuomo didn't know what to do. He tried to communicate with the surrounding consciousness like he usually did. The moment he thought, the gray consciousness around him started to flood towards him. A short while later, there was a ball of consciousness on his hand. Zuomo was joyful. It was this easy. But before he could be happy for a while, the ball of consciousness on his hand disappeared. As expected, it wouldn't be so simple. He wasn't demotivated. He was not surprised at the result. Since the first time he heard the words consciousness splitting, he felt it wouldn't be so simple. After that, he tried all kinds of experiments and concluded many things. It was true that he could control the consciousness here, and it was very easy to control. But the consciousness was like sand. It could easily be squeezed into a ball in the hand, but once he let go, it would collapse into a pile. Once Zhuomo's thought moved away, the consciousness would return to its original state. Zhuomo felt that it was not correct. In his understanding, the consciousness that was separated should have a certain initiative of its own. Otherwise, what would be the difference compared to him separating his consciousness into separate parts? The consciousness was shapeless and intangible, and so it could be manipulated into any shape. When he was using the Greatly Fire formation to fight against Zhong Mingyan, Zhuomo had used a similar technique. At the time, he needed to control Dragon Tying formation, Li Fire formation, Three-Turn formation, and Greatly Fire formation at the same time. In order to control all four formations, Zhuomo's skill with the consciousness had reached an extremely detailed level. At that time, his consciousness had been like an octopus with 4 tentacles which he used to control the 4 formations at the same time. From a technical viewpoint, that wasn't truly controlling them simultaneously because there was an order to the formations. It could be more appropriate to say it was cooperation. It was just that the gap between the times that the 4 formations were used that it looked as though it had proceeded at the same time. Controlling 4 formations at the same time, that was Zhuomo's limit. It wasn't multitasking with the mind, but making 4 continuous steps seamlessly. Consciousness splitting was truly multitasking. It could do many things at the same time. If that was true, then other than the consciousness, what also had to split apart was the mind. Zhuomo sunk into thought. The consciousness might be shapeless and intangible, but it was like Ling power. Yet it could be separated. The mind was the thoughts of a person. How to split that? That was not possible. Zhuomo understood his own pathway was definitely wrong. He suddenly thought about the Yao seed in his body. The moment the thought appeared in his mind, the scenery around him changed again. The sea of consciousness was quickly pulled closer. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in the sea of consciousness. Puyao was nearby. Zhuomo saw Puyao suddenly open his eye and scan the surroundings. Then a puzzled expression appeared on his face. Zhuomo didn't have the time to call Puyao before his body passed through the flames and was pulled under below the sea of consciousness. And then he saw the Yao seed. Only now did he know that the Yao seed was actually hidden away in his sea of consciousness, and in the very center at that. Zhuomo suddenly started to admire Puyao. To be able to bury an item like this into the deepest part of the sea of consciousness, Puyao was quite powerful. He had always assumed that the sea of consciousness was a small island, but now, he found it was actually a sphere. The place he usually went to was the surface of the sphere, and the inside of the sphere was empty. The Yao seed was in the very center, approximately the size of a walnut. Around it, there were many narrow tubes similar to channels or vines. Zhuomo couldn't name them. These slim tubes connected the Yao seed to the surface of the sea of consciousness. The Yao seed had been added later. Then these thin tubes should also have been added later. After he had obtained the Yao seed, his control of the consciousness had grown dramatically. Zhuomo guessed that it was caused by these things. Looking at the Yao seed covered with vine-like tubes, he fell into a daze. His heart suddenly moved. If he copied the structure of the Yao seed, could he stabilize the consciousness, rather than have it move like sand? The more he thought, the more he felt it was possible. Thinking hard about it, he discovered the consciousness, though shapeless and intangible, did not dissipate because of the existence of the sea of consciousness. The Yao seed allowed him to control the consciousness ever more closely to his wishes. Seeing a ray of light, Zhuomo quickly found himself facing another question. Then what could he use in place of the sea of consciousness, and what about the Yao seed? He didn't have Puyao's abilities. It was clearly impossible for him to take things in from the outside world. Only things already present could be used here. Looking at the Yao seed in front of him, he couldn't help but think that if this Yao seed was really like a vine, it would be wonderful if it could bear fruit. That way, he wouldn't be lacking for objects to use. This absurd thought just flashed humorously through his mind. He felt that his thinking should have been incorrect, but he needed to find a solution. He started to wander through the sea of consciousness, searching for items that could be the core. It was strange. He could clearly see Puyao, but the two of them seemed to be in completely different worlds. No matter how hard he shouted, even passing in front of the other, Puyao did not feel it at all. After trying a few times, he gave up on this useless action and started to search for things that could replace the Yao seed. Yet, after he went through all of the sea of consciousness, he didn't find anything. Was this thinking wrong? He unconsciously floated back into the consciousness, feeling the sense of familiarity pass through the consciousness. He furrowed his brows as he thought. Just at this time, a speck of glittering starlight like silver sand slowly floated past his eyes. His eyes suddenly stopped. That bit of starlight actually had gathered a thin layer of consciousness, as though it had a thin gray shield. Glee suddenly came into Zhuomo's eyes. Starlight. Right, how could he have forgotten starlight? He carefully reached out with his hand to grab that speck of starlight. The speck had no weight in his hand, but he could feel even the thin layer of consciousness around the starlight even more clearly. This layer of consciousness was slightly denser than the consciousness of any other place. This was it. Zhuo decided to call this stardust, because when he looked at it closely, it wasn't a ball of light, but something tangible, like sand. Having found the miraculous use of stardust, Zhuo started to squat next to the 4 stars to gather stardust. The speed the 4 stars sprayed out stardust was not fast. After a long time, Zhuo only gathered a small handful. He decided to first try using the amount of stardust he had. The stardust was as loose as sand. If he wanted to use them as the inner core, he needed to forge them into one object. Forging was not unfamiliar to Zhuo. Right now, he could be considered half an expert in controlling fire. He quickly became depressed because he could not summon the stalagmite fire. Without fire, wasn't it a dream to forge them together? Fire. His gaze couldn't help but land on the sea of consciousness. That was a large patch of fire. Maybe he could use those crimson fires, Zhuo thought uncertainly. But at this time he didn't have a better choice, so he could only try. Yet what he didn't expect was, when the thought just appeared, a strand of fire left the sea of flames and flew in front of him. It was so smooth Zhuo was awestruck. He had never been able to control the flames in the sea of consciousness before. But after thinking for a while, he couldn't think of a cause. In any case, its effectiveness would be known once he tried. Daringly, he took control of this strand of deep crimson fire and started to forge the stardust in his hands. The deep red flame, carrying a fraction of black, covered the stardust, twisting about like a belly dancer. Chapter 153 Soul-Tethered Talisman. A bean-sized bead appeared on Zhuo's hand, giving off a soft and warm star-like glow. The bead was spherical, flawlessly spherical, and very light. A thick layer of gray consciousness covered it, which made its glow appear dimmer. Zhuo knew that he was halfway there. In reality, he felt his present situation was extremely weird. Everything in front of him was weird. There were so many wondrous aspects that could not be described, too many things that he could not understand. But so what? He actually hoped that this situation would continue for a bit longer. Please don't be a dream. It was a fleeting thought. He didn't thinking about the weirdness it anymore. This perfect bead that was forged out of stardust. Zhuo called it the star bead. The star bead could automatically attract consciousness, but it still wasn't enough. If the gigantic gray ball that Zhuo was on was his entire consciousness, then the amount of consciousness that the star bead attracted was so little it was insignificant. That little minuscule bit of consciousness lacked real value. Luckily, he could control the consciousness. He started to urge the consciousness to gather at the star bead and condense. No one paid any attention to Zhuo. Even Wu Ling Sanren had his attention on Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping. The battle between the two had reached the decisive moment. Wei Sheng was covered in blood, and there were 3 more sword wounds on Gu Rongping's body. To say nothing of talent, just purely based on pain tolerance, Gu Rongping fell far behind Wei Sheng. Even Gu Rongping had to admit it to himself. What sort of monster was this guy in front of him? No matter what movement he made, it would pull on his wounds. That heart-boring pain almost brought him to tears. Fresh blood continuously flowed out of the wounds. He could clearly feel the power in his body slowly diminish due to blood loss. His head started to ring. His vision gradually became blurry. His Ling power was almost depleted. His channels were wounded. But how come this guy in front of him, who was far more injured than him, still hadn't fallen down? Wei Sheng had many more wounds than him, but why didn't he seem to be affected? Wei Sheng was flooded in blood, so much that he was suspicious that the others had been bleed dry. Why was he still persisting? Wei Sheng's cultivation was much lower than his. It should have long been used up. His channels should have been damaged a long time ago. But why? Looking at the bloody figure in front of him, helplessness and hopelessness suddenly creeped into Gu Rongping's heart. The air around Zuomo's body gradually calmed. The sounds of explosions became rarer, until it reached a complete silence. If one was watching, they would have found that the air around Zuomo's body had went from one extreme to another. There was no longer any explosions, no flow of air, nothing. The area one zhang around his body was so silent it seemed to be tangible, with no movement in the air at all. But no one noticed. Wu Ling Sanren and Wei Fei were completely concentrated on the battle between Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping. The few people that were fighting viciously in the formation also did not detect it. Zuomo was forced to stop. Floating in front of him was a ball of black-gray consciousness the size of a bamboo basket. This was Zuomo's result. After continuously condensing, this consciousness ball had the star bead as the inner core. As expected, the outer layer of consciousness did not dissipate. He had taken out about 1/10 of his consciousness and condensed it into this basket-sized ball of consciousness. The density of the consciousness ball had reached its limit and was unable to be compressed any further. Due to the density, it was not like a ball of air, but was rock solid. Naturally, the star ball at the center could not be seen. So was it complete? Zuomo was not certain. He had made the object, but he didn't have any idea how to use it. Pu Yao had just described a concept. It was a pity that he was unable to communicate with Pu Yao. He had a strong feeling that if he left this wonderful state right now, it would definitely be hard to ever enter this wondrous state again. How was he to use it? Looking at the black-gray rock ball of consciousness, Zuomo was in a predicament. He could feel that there was a certain connection between himself and the ball of consciousness, as though it was a part of his body. Zuomo's heart moved, and the ball of consciousness suddenly started to circle and dance around him. So interesting. Zuomo instantly became interested. He didn't need to exert any control. Where his thoughts directed, the ball of consciousness would move. It was very fun. Zuomo had never felt so great. Even the little art of cloud and rain, that he was most familiar with, he could not cast and maintain it so effortlessly without thought. The familiarity could not compare to this feeling that the ball was a part of him. He joyfully played around. Anything that he could think of, the ball of consciousness would usually be able to accomplish it. But quickly he found something worth noting. The air-like consciousness seemed to reject the ball of consciousness. A natural empty space would form around the ball of consciousness. Zuomo couldn't help but frown. The consciousness and the ball of consciousness was from the same origins. Why would they repel each other? Pu Yao had never told him that the divided consciousness and the original consciousness would repel each other. Did he do something wrong? Just as he was uncertain of what to do, he suddenly had an extremely daring idea. Why not try and place the ball of consciousness into a talisman? Since the ball of consciousness and his consciousness repelled each other, then he would find the ball of consciousness another place. Additionally, the ball of consciousness felt intimately connected to him. And if it happened to be in a talisman, just think how great it would be. If a talisman could act according to his thoughts, and turn into a part of his body. The more Zuomo thought, the more appealing he found the idea. Because the ball of consciousness was connected to his mind, he was able to understand that the ball of consciousness did not seem to disagree with his idea. So he did it. Zuomo started to calculate which talisman was suitable. Very quickly he found a suitable talisman. 5-colored pagoda. He didn't have many talismans in the first place, and naturally didn't have many to pick from. The inside of the five-colored pagoda was a small pocket space which could take in the ball of consciousness. The five-colored pagoda may be able to deconstruct ordinary materials into the five elemental essences, but consciousness was not one of the five elements. Therefore he did not have to worry about the ball being processed. In his perspective, the five-colored pagoda might only be half completed, but of all the talismans he possessed, it had the greatest potential to grow and the greatest abilities. The moment he finished the thought, the ball of consciousness in front of him disappeared. Immediately after, Zuomo could feel that it was now positioned in an area filled with essence of the five elements. It was inside the five-colored pagoda. Zuomo was gleeful. At the same moment, a blinding five-colored light suddenly lit up the formation. The four people fighting inside the formation, and Chang Heng who had been watching the rings of light, all stopped and raised their heads in shock. A five-colored pagoda appeared above the formation, releasing five colors of light that was both strong and beautiful. It was so eye-catching that the crescent moon above the five-colored pagoda seemed to have lost all color. As the five-colored pagoda rose out of the clouds, light streamed like a sunrise. The exterior of the five-colored pagoda that was covered by the five-colored light had changed greatly. There was a glass-like sheen on the body of the tower, glistening and clear. The colors of each of the five different levels was even more clean and fine. The eaves of the tower curved at a great angle, looking like flying eaves. The body of the tower was narrower and taller than before. The top of the tower seemed sharp. The sudden surge of light alarmed everyone. Soul-tethered talisman. Xian Yin was the first to react. A light suddenly rose in his eyes, his voice full of excitement. The other three dazedly stared at that exquisite five-colored pagoda in the mirage. The light that it produced, every detail, it all displayed just how unordinary it was. After a while, the other three managed to react. Pei Yuanran was the first to turn around his face to look at Xian Yin. It really is a soul-tethered talisman? The disciples behind them stared at each other. They were able to hear the excitement and nervousness in the sect leader's voice. They couldn't help but be curious. What was a soul-tethered talisman? Was it worth Xian Yin Shirshu and the sect leader to be so excited? Definitely. Xian Yin replied resolutely. An uncontrollable joy floated onto the other three people's face, unable to be disguised. Xian Yin was skilled in forging, and never over-exaggerated. If he was so certain, then it definitely wouldn't be wrong. Soul-tethered talisman. Zuomo actually had a soul-tethered talisman. If Xian Yin was able to realize this, then other people naturally could also see it. Surprise and shock made their way onto many people's faces. A soul-tethered talisman was a talisman that was intimately connected to a xiuzha. This kind of talisman was extremely rare. The power of a soul-tethered talisman far surpassed normal talismans, and it had many qualities that made people drool. It was able to become stronger as the xiuzha increased in cultivation. It was connected to the mind of its owner, so they could use it to the greatest effect. The meaning of soul-tethered was akin to being a part of the cultivator, so they did not have to worry about the talisman being stolen by others. Even if a soul-tethered talisman was stolen, the thief would not be able to use it. It was bound to the xiuzha. That was why it was called a soul-tethered talisman, who would cut off someone else's hand and then connect it to their body. A soul-tethered talisman was the highest kind of talisman all cultivators dreamed about. It was strange, but no one was able to forge a soul-tethered talisman. They usually were formed through great treasures which underwent some fortuitous occurrences. Up until now, no one was able to clearly describe the factors for the formation of a soul-tethered talisman. While there were many benefits to the soul-tethered talisman, it wasn't as though there were no disadvantages. Due to the great intimacy between the talisman and the xiuzha, if the soul-tethered talisman was damaged, the cultivator would also be affected. Usually, soul-tethered talismans were also called life-saving talismans. Those that possessed one used one scarcely and carefully. No one would have thought that a Zhuji would possess a soul-tethered talisman. People envied Zuomo's luck. As the five-colored pagoda transformed and appeared, the completed 72-child formation, Skyring Moonchime formation, also changed. The light released by the 5-colored pagoda gradually disappeared. At the same time, the crescent moon in the sky turned to a full moon, becoming even brighter and clean as it hung up in the sky. The full moon was like a wheel. Countless moon-colored strands silently drifted down from the full moon. The moon-colored thin strands seemed to flutter in the wind on the other end, quietly moving through the air and passing through the freely swimming rings of light. In the blink of an eye, the light rings of various sizes had been threaded through by the moon-colored strands into bunches similar to wind chimes. The light of the full moon brightened. The thin strands that fell down shook, and all the rings of light shook, countless rings chiming at the same time. Ding! The clear sound traveled through the enormous Great Pine Pavilion, able to be heard at every corner. The skiring moonchime formation had been reborn. Chapter 154 Moonchime. Sound storm. Thousands of rings of light were chiming all at once. To the ears of everyone watching it was unspeakably clear and pleasurable, but the expressions of the 5 people inside the formation changed. Even Chong Hung, who was usually stoic, narrowed his eyes instinctively. He unhesitatingly reached towards the copper ring between his collarbones and took out the bloody spider sword. He glanced at the others in the formation. Everyone acted as though they were facing a great enemy. Even the yellow-faced man that had been steadily overpowering him previously had a serious expression as he held the copper dagger axe in front of his chest. When that clear chime from the rings of light had sounded out, the Ling power in their bodies shook. Their energies became unsteady. Just a chime from the rings of light was so strong. The 5 people instantly became nervous. Even the stupidest person understood now that the great formation in front of them had changed. The full moon shone in the sky. The moon-colored strands were like hair, soft and powerless, weaved in with the rings of light and ringing of wind chimes. The scene was a beautiful painting. Such a beautiful scene, yet there was no admiration from the 5 people inside it. In their eyes, the formation was powerful and full of murderous intent. Behind the black gauze, Sue could not keep her composure, her face full of shock. Such a formation, such a display. Was it really something a Zhuji Xiuzha could complete? That image of a wretched, greedy, and soft rice-eating zombie in her head was completely destroyed. Behind that expressionless face, there seemed to be a long shadow, deep and hard to predict. Had she been wrong in her impression of Zhuamo from the beginning? There were thousands rings of light on the moon strings. They slowly swayed, elegant and soft. Tightly focusing on the moon strands and light rings in front of her, Sue's gaze seemed to be deeply attracted to them, and she was unable to move her eyes away. The rings of light gently trembled, and little slivers of killing intent slowly permeated, silently taking over every bit of space. Her mouth was slightly dry. She had always wondered why Zhuamo hadn't sent out the paper crane. She understood now. Zhuamo didn't need her help at all. But at this time, her body was tense, not daring to slack off the tiniest bit. Her gaze still didn't move. The sword scripture that she practiced belonged to the area of magnetism. Magnetic power was extremely good for detection. These tiny bits of killing intent appeared as non-threatening, but in reality, they could gather together at any time and kill. Yet what truly made her on her guard, and more nervous than ever, was that she was their target. Why? Why would she also be an enemy? Sue couldn't understand, but there was no time for her to think. She could only prepare for battle. She had a strong feeling that once the big formation was activated, it wouldn't be so relaxing. Wu Ling Sanren and Wei Fei's expressions were heavy. Wei Fei stared down and asked solemnly, "Sanren, do you recognize this formation?" Wu Ling Sanren shook his head. "No, but this formation should be 4th grade. However, it must be that soul-tethered talismans that he just got which makes it so powerful." He nervously stared at the formation below him, eyes unwavering. He had to admit he had made a wrong judgment. Before, he had only felt Zhuamo had some talent, but his skill with formations was in the range of normality. But looking at it now, the formation that guy had set up was far beyond his cultivation stage. If it was only that, he would have just been slightly surprised. What really shocked him was that this guy had a soul-tethered talisman. Truly a fortunate guy. He couldn't help but be envious. His cultivation was multiple times higher than Zuomo, but he didn't have a soul-tethered talisman. He was not the only one that was green-eyed over Zuomo's soul-tethered talisman. Wei Fei also sighed over the unfairness of the heavens. However, they knew that soul-tethered talismans could not be planned for. Both were also Jindan experts, the strength of their mind extremely resolute, and did not move so easily for an outside object. The two of them quickly returned to normal. What does he want to do? Wei Fei's brows furrowed as he snorted coldly. Does he want to fight 1 against 5? Has a soul-tethered talisman, so he doesn't even know where his limits are? Wu Ling Sanren didn't speak. After continuously making mistaken judgments, he felt the less he said, the better. Also, based on the grave presence of the formation below, Zuomo may not be brash. What he really could not see clearly was Zuomo's present situation. Inside the formation, Zuomo still maintained his weird posture, his eyes empty. The air around him seemed to be like glue, motionless. If one looked closely, they would find that the rings of light near him were affected by an invisible force that pushed them away. The abnormalities had started when Zuomo had entered this strange state. Wu Ling Sanren didn't have any confidence. The 5-colored pagoda floated in the sky above the pond. On the sword-sharp point, there was a dot of starlight that flashed, communicating with the full moon in the sky. The moon dimmed and brightened. Clink, 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 clink. Suddenly, the light rings on the moon's strings started to shake. The small chimes were like a tide, spreading out in waves. The 5 people inside the formation stiffened as the tension rose. At this time, they did not have the attention to spare to fight with other people because, to their shock, they discovered that Zuomo did not plan on letting even one of them escape from the formation escape. TSA. Unlucky. Luoli felt helpless. Zuomo went crazy again. The flying sword floated beside him, waiting to attack. He said those words, but light came into his eyes, and slight anticipation rose. There was quite a period of time since the last time they had fought. He always had the thought of trying to fight Zuomo again, but he had never found the chance. Now that the opportunity was right in front of him, the desire for battle burned in his heart. In Luo Li's mind, Zuomo and Wei Sheng were all geniuses of the sect. Wei Sheng Shixiang was like a mountain peak unable to be scaled. Facing Shixiang, one would only feel hopelessness. Zuomo was completely different. If one saw him usually, one would always accidentally underestimate and disdain him. But when one truly faced him, he might not win, but he definitely would surprise and shock others. Gui Feng also detected the thick killing intent in the formation. He didn't use the ghost movement to hide his figure like usual. The entire formation was under the control of the other. The effect of the ghost movement was limited. His expression was grave. 2 blooms of bright green ghost fire burned on the white bone sword. The body of the sword hummed like the soft sobs of souls. Zuomo still hadn't left that wondrous state. This state made people intoxicated, a state where anything was possible, as though everything was understood. He silently stood there as though he was a spectator, watching everything that was happening in front of him. The 5-colored pagoda whose thoughts were connected to his was stand guard in the center of the great formation, controlling the entire Skyring Moonchime formation. Every detail of the Skyring Moonchime formation flowed across his heart. He couldn't see it, but he could clearly feel it. It was passed on from the 5-colored pagoda. Before, his original intentions had been to activate and use the 72-child formation Skyring Moonchime formation in order to gain some experience, and to comprehend some of the intricacies of the Skyring Moonchime formation. Right now, every detail of the Skyring Moonchime formation was in front of him. Due to this, he decided he would try the power of the Skyring Moonchime formation. His thoughts moved, and the 5-colored pagoda activated the great formation. The fine chimes that had like a tide suddenly disappeared. The enormous formation suddenly sank into a dead silence, suffocating like a rock pressed to the chest. The 5 people tensed to their limits inside the formation. This suffocating and heavy silence was the prelude to the killing. The round moon suddenly lit up, emanating the brightest and strongest light it could without any regard. In the blink of an eye, the round moon, which had been as clean as jade, seemed to have started to burn, the strong light making it appear like a ball of fire. Clink. A ring of light that was the closest to the full moon gave a clear sound. This clear sound announced the beginning of the killing move. There seemed to be some force that was being passed down through the moon string. Like it was a relay, one by one, the rings of light sounded. Clink, clink, clink. The sounds went from slow to fast, the frequent chimes like a suddenly rising tide. Looking from the sky, the rings of light hanging off the strands coming of the moon were like dominoes being set off, one shaking after the previous. The shaking of the first ring of light was the least, and the sound was the lightest. The second ring of light vibrated more, and the sound was slightly louder. The third ring of light vibrated even greater in magnitude, the sound even louder. This cascade of changes was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the power seemed to have passed to the end of the moon string, and to the last ring of light. The last ring of light on each moon strand lit up at the same time. After the power from the preceding rings of light finally reached the last ring of light, the chiming of the ring of light had reached a maximum. Clang. The 5 people inside the formation felt their vision blur. Everything they saw seemed to twist and change. The ground underneath their feet shook violently, almost knocking them off their feet. All of their expressions changed. Sue's Black Day's sword was held across her chest, her right hand holding the hilt of the sword, her left hand straight like a sword, pressing gently on the body of the sword. She shouted clearly, "Protect." With her as the center, a terrifying magnetic force exploded into the surroundings. Luoli didn't go grab the flying sword floating in front of him, but spread out his right hand, the palm open. His voice was ethereal, lonely and empty, self-separate. The ethereal sword essence was like a female ghost dancing by his side. Chong Heng's blood spider sword transformed into the blood spider, shielding him from the front. The blood light on the body of the blood spider was extremely bright, as though it had just been taken out of a blood pond. The blood spider gave a vicious howl, ready to leap. At some time, a heavy copper armor appeared on the yellow-faced man. The thick armor covered his entire body, only revealing his eyes. His hand was holding the copper dagger axe flatly, his back straight as he bellowed, "Break!" A child appearing about 6 or 7 years old appeared in front of Gui Feng. He was very chubby, his skin tender. He was wearing a red belly cloth. However, his eyes were an eerie green. Gui Feng shouted, "Go!" Gui Feng's killing move. Little Ghost King. The 5 people simultaneously used their killing moves. They could feel a strong threat. The activation of the Skyring Moonchime formation did not have any forewarning. Once it started, it activated its strongest attack. Inside the formation, the lion-headed copper cauldrons that Zhuo used to set up the Li Fire formation collapsed into dust. The metal nails turned to dust, the jade cards turned to dust, the plants turned to dust, the ground turned to dust. The half-moose-sized pond turned into a ball of fine mist. This was the initiation of the strongest killing move of the 72-child formation, Skyring Moonchime formation. Moonchime Soundstorm. Chapter 155 Collision. Lin Qian silently stood in the air, looking at the enormous mirage in the distance. He could not see what was occurring inside the formation, but he was very shocked at the appearance of the 5-colored pagoda. Other people may not know the origins of the 5-colored pagoda, but he had seen Zhuo buying this talisman from the 100 Treasures Flying Pavilion. The 5-colored pagoda had some clever abilities, but it was just an incomplete talisman. In his eyes, it was not a good talisman, and wouldn't have expected it to become a soul-tethered talisman. But what the 5-colored pagoda had just appeared was truly a soul-tethered talisman. Something definitely changed in this period of time. Just at this time, the mirage suddenly shook violently. The picture became indistinct, and nothing could be seen. The audience, which had been excited, instantly gasped. What had happened? Did the mirage illusion formation malfunction? Lin Qian was slightly surprised. The stability of the mirage illusion formation that Tian Songzi set up could not be doubted. Did something happen inside the Great Pine Pavilion? He was not the only person surprised. The person who felt the greatest surprise was Tian Songzi. To set up the mirage illusion formation, He had expended many resources. Seeing an unexpected occurrence happen, he couldn't help but frown. A sect leader was also puzzled. Technically, there shouldn't be a problem with the Mirage Illusion formation. Yes, of course. The other sect leaders opened in agreement. Mirage Illusion formation was an extremely mature and stable formation, having been used since a long time ago. Other than the size, which was much larger than the average formation, there was nothing different about the formation that had been set up this time. The corner of Tian Songzi's eye suddenly jumped. Someone noticed his abnormality and asked, "Has friend found something?" Tian Songzi's expression was normal and said with a smile, "A small accident." As expected, when he finished, the mirage quickly resumed. Everyone's attention was quickly attracted by the mirage. Shock slightly spilled out of Tian Songzi's eyes. The Great Pine Pavilion was a secret paradise talisman. It was always in the possession of each generation of Dongfu Hall's master. Just now, he had detected an extremely strong Ling power ripple that had exploded suddenly in Great Pine Pavilion. It was that Ling power ripple which had affected the Mirage Illusion formation and caused its situation. This burst of Ling power was like a meteor and had flashed by and disappearing in a flash. His eyes went towards the formation belt inside the mirage. The location of the Ling power explosion was there. Who had caused the Ling power explosion? Zuimo? Or someone else? He wasn't surprised that Yu Bai was eliminated, and he wasn't sad. There were many benefits to Yu Bai for having such an experience of real battle. As to everything else, he did not care. Maybe Yu Bai would care, but this was what Tian Songzi hoped he could encounter. Yu Bai might be respectful and warm usually, but in reality, he did not really know reality, and was overly proud. This proud aura was a trait of many young masters. It was the special aura that would appear most easily on the core disciples of each sect. Tian Songzi's eyes went towards the big formation. He couldn't help but admire Pei Yuan Ran. In Wukong Sword Sect's disciples, other than Luo Li, who had a faint attitude of a young master, Wei Sheng and Zuoyamo did not carry themselves this way. These two young people were also the two with the most spectacular performance of this year's Sword Test Conference. Moonchime Soundstorm. Inside the formation, everything was pulverized to dust and thrown about. The dust and mist covered the entire formation, becoming even finer and smaller. Amidst the sky of dust, Zuomo's arms was open like a divine being, motionless, his eyes indifferent and empty without a hint of emotion. Within a one-zhang radius around Zuomo, the dust and mist were blocked by an invisible wall. The greatest killing move of the 72-child formation, Skyring Moonchime formation, shook the Great Pine Pavilion. Nothing could block the sounds that swept through the Great Pine Pavilion. Countless young beasts bled from their orifices and died. As the sound storm approached, all Xiozha felt their energies shake, their Ling power almost spinning out of control. All were shocked. That was the case for the Xiozha outside the formation. The pressure faced by the 5 people inside the formation was hundreds of times stronger. Sue's fine brow was creased into a ball, showing a slightly pained expression. She had underestimated the power of the great formation. In the sound storm, the Ling power in her body had almost collapsed, and the magnetic shield had almost dissolved. She bit her teeth, not daring to keep anything back. All the Ling power inside her body channeled and flowed towards the Black Day's sword. The magnetic force twisted space, covering her, and turning her into a mirage. Luo Li's situation wasn't much better. Blood streamed out of the corner of his mouth. His cultivation was not as high as the other 4. After the attack, he was wounded. But the corner of his mouth went up rather than down, the desire for battle in his eyes increasing instead, furious, hot. Last time, I pushed you to such a sorry state, but you did not surrender. This time, you push me to such a sorry. How can I lose to you? His pupils suddenly expanded. The flying sword floating in front of his body hummed, its body shaking. Like a stream of light, it stabbed into the ground in front of his feet up to the hilt. He knelt down on one knee in front of the sword, muttering in a low voice, "Self-separation. Self-separation. Wali. Self-separation." It echoed around his body. The figure floating in front of his figure, which appeared like a female ghost, suddenly became clear. A plainly dressed female with her hair up stood. Her eyes were angry. She lightly sighed and raised her graceful wrist. A green and red light flew from her hand, blocking in front of the two of them. Chang Hung expressionlessly stood. The ground under his feet shattered. Even when they shattered into even smaller pieces of dust, he was not moved. In front of him, the blood spider seemed to be enraged, howling as the black seals across its entire body brightened. A bloody curtain of light, tinged slightly with black, blocked in front of the person and spider. The yellow-faced man wore heavy armor, holding a copper dagger axe, and shouted. A blinding light appeared at the tip of the copper dagger axe. It clearly was piercing emptiness, but it was like it was encountering great resistance. It slowly pierced further, each bit extremely difficult. The light of the dagger axe became even more bright, so bright one could not look at it. The little ghost king in front of Gui Feng spoke baby talk as he waved his tender lotus root-like hands. An eerie green curtain of light appeared layer by layer as he moved. The thin green curtains were as fragile as eggshell, breaking as soon as they formed. Gui Feng finally showed shock. The little ghost king seemed to have been provoked, not ing anymore. A vicious and cruel expression appeared on the innocent and adorable face. His hands started to dance, the movement strange. Each movement was filled with a dark and terrifying presence, like a sorcerer dancing. A eerie green belt of light appeared, quickly spinning around Gui Feng and the little ghost king. From the belt of light came sorrowful and angry sobs. The air that surrounded Zuaimo, who was in a wondrous state, suddenly rippled. That pair of indifferent and empty eyes moved, and became a fraction livelier. Zuaimo felt his body become gold. The pleasurable feeling from floating in the consciousness flew away. There was no gray, no starlight, no sea of consciousness. He moved his eyes. Above his head, a full moon hung, the moon strings plentiful as hair, the rings like wind chimes. The first thought in Zuamo's mind was not good. Why did he wake up at such a dangerous time? Before he could become irritated, he was bowled over by a large Yao beast that was charging at full speed. Splat! He spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Like a sandbag, he was thrown into the air. The strongest attack of the 72-child formation, Skyring Moonchime Formation, Moonchime Soundstorm, and the life-saving measures of Chang Hung, and the other four crashed together without any technique. The strongest encounter in the sword test conference. Boom boom boom. The bright light was like the sun rising. The earth cracked, the sky changed color. The Skyring Moonchime Formation could not endure the terrifying power from such an encounter, and instantly crumbled. The pitiful Zuaimo. He had woken up at the most crucial time, his skill level dropping back to his normal level. How could he defend against the collision of these two forces? Luckily, the majority of the power was absorbed by the Skyring Moonchime Formation, but Zuaimo still couldn't endure the rest. He instantly was seriously wounded. The light around the five-colored pagoda dimmed, cracks appearing on the body of the tower. With a tragic hum, it turned to a stream of light and flew into Zuamo's body. Chang Hung and the others were not much better. The face-on collision of the two forces were far beyond their expectations. Before they were able to react, they were forcefully ejected from the formation several dozen zhang away. All five were injured. Each person had wounds, their faces full of shock. Even Chang Hung was not an exception. Through the mirage formation, the audience in Dongfu was unable to see the situation inside the Great Formation. The sudden blurring of the formation also made many people speculate. Just as everyone was puzzled, the mirage, which had just recovered, suddenly exploded with a blinding light. Not ready for the blinding flash, many people found their vision a sea of white, unable to see anything. Dongfu instantly turned to chaos. The panicked people instinctively protecting themselves. The enormous Dongfu exploded in shouts. The situation only calmed down after a while, when everyone's eyes had recovered. The fearful people unconsciously looked towards the mirage that had just changed. Hiss. It was rare to see several 10,000s of people inhale in shock. On the mirage, the position where Zuaimo had originally set up the formation belt had completely transformed. The pond was gone, the woods were gone, the formation was gone. What they could see was an enormous great pit. The depth of the pit was far more than 10 zhang, its width reaching an astonishing 50 zhang. Such a terrifying pit made everyone feel cold in their hearts as they swallowed. Around the great hole, there were 15 great cracks that were wider than 5 zhang which snaked their way away from the big hole. The longest crack was 3 li in length. Even the shortest crack was 100 zhang. The black big hole was full of cracks, startling to the eye. It looked like an extremely ugly jellyfish. But anyone who saw this jellyfish would only feel fear and tremble. What kind of power could do this? The audience in Dongfu was left in shock. The xiuzhe inside the Great Pine Pavilion were struck even more deeply. The moment the light appeared, that power which seemed to destroy the world made everyone feel the terror of death's approach. No one had any interest in fighting. Their hearts were filled with terror, yet their legs seemed to be enchanted as they ran towards the location of the light of their own initiative. When they saw the great hole, the last vestige of power seemed to leave them, and they sat down beside the hole. At the gathering place of the Dongfu sect leaders, a voice full of anger and pain sounded. My Great Pine Pavilion. Chapter 156 Brothers in Difficulty. Don't forget. Even in death you must not forget. Zuomo woke up and slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he noticed was the pain. It was like the bones in his body had been rattled. Just the slightest of movements had caused bone-aching pain. He instantly became docile and motionless. The familiar fragrance of medicine entered his nose. He instantly realized where this was. Oh, his life was really bad. It seemed every time he attended a fight, he would enter the fragrant ginger yard. It looked like he was quite heavily wounded this time. Cough shitty, you're awake. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from his right. Eldest Xixiang? Zuomo instinctively turned his neck to look right. Just as he moved, he couldn't help but inhale sharply. So painful. He moved his head with great difficulty. When he saw eldest Xixiang on a bed not far away at his right, he was instantly shocked. Lying on the bed where eldest Xixiang's voice came from was a person whose body was entirely bound in bandages with only his eyes left uncovered. Eldest Xixiang, is it you? Zuomo asked with uncertainty. This person who was wrapped up like a mummy, was he really the courageous and invincible eldest Xixiang? And the person under the bandages responded. It really was him. He said. You've been unconscious the longest. We were all very worried about you. Eldest Xixiang, who wounded you like this? Zuomo asked in disbelief. Aha, I fought with Gu Rongping, he did this. Wei Sheng's tone was relaxed. Zuomo still didn't quite believe it. That little white face shouldn't be this strong. He isn't much better off. Wei Sheng smiled. In the end, I managed to slice him 12 times in succession. Hearing this, Zuomo sweated. Sliced 12 times. Even if that little white face was a big carrot, he would have been sliced into a toothpick. However, he felt that this was expected. In the same generation, how could there be anyone who could overpower eldest Xixiang to the point he could not retaliate? Seeing eldest Xixiang worse off than he was, his mood, which had been down due to his injuries, instantly became much better. He felt this way even though Wei Sheng was Zuomo's respected and loved eldest Xixiang. Brothers in difficulty. Suddenly, Wei Sheng suddenly shouted in Zuomo's direction. Luo Shitty, are you better today? Zuomo unconsciously turned his face to the left. There was a bed on his left. Luoli was lying on top. Even though it wasn't as severe as eldest Xixiang, but his expression was withered, his complexion pale. It was easy to see he was seriously injured. So there wasn't just one brother in difficulty. Zuomo was struck. When Luoli looked at Zuomo, his expression was slightly unnatural. Zuomo immediately remembered that the person who had wounded Luoli had been himself. That wondrous state had disappeared. But Zuomo clearly remembered what had happened during that time. If Zuomo's face could move, his expression right now would certainly be extremely unnatural. Due to the fact he had been in a strange state, he had performed beyond his abilities. Even if he was completely healed and set up the 72-child formation Skyring Moonchime formation again, he might not be able to successfully perform, Moonchime Soundstorm, successfully 1 in 10 times. Is Xixiang better? Luo Li avoided Zuomo's eyes and asked Wei Sheng. His mentality was much better than before. Even though Wei Sheng had once been his sword servant, but right now he was Wukong Sword Sect's eldest Xixiang. Greater power meant a greater status. The rules of the sect had always been so. Now no one in Wukong Sword Sect would doubt Wei Sheng Xixiang's strength. Facing Zuo, Luo Li still had some desire to compete, but facing Wei Sheng he had completely submitted. Much better. Wei Sheng's tone was nothing like that of a seriously wounded patient. Extremely optimistic. After a bit of time I'll probably heal. The 3 of them were all severely wounded, unable to move as they laid on the bed. At the beginning there was a slight barrier between Zuo and Luo Li. But now that they were in the same predicament, their relations gradually improved. After a while, they conversed freely. Before Zuo hadn't liked Luo Li. Upon further acquaintance, he found that Luo Li was not as bad as he had imagined. Quite the opposite, in fact. Even though he would unconsciously reveal the pride ingrained in his bones, his personality was straightforward, and he was a forthright person. The 2 of them had fought 2 times. Both times, each of them had been seriously wounded. To a certain degree, their relationship was forged in fighting. The 2 of them were also full of admiration towards each other's strength. Nothing needed to be said of Luo Li to Zuo. Right now, Zuo had become one of the hottest people in Dongfu. At the end, he had fought 1-on-5, and it had turned into a legend in Dongfu. No one had saw the 1-on-5 fight, but everyone had clearly seen the terrifyingly gigantic hole in the Great Pine Pavilion. Zuo knew how much his strength was really worth. Each time eldest Xixiang and Luo Li mentioned this matter, his heart was extremely insecure. In his perspective, Luo Li's strength was much stronger than his. Suddenly remembering this matter, Zuo couldn't help but ask in curiosity, Xixiang, that day, I seemed to see a woman in front of you. Who was that? Luo Li was instantly slightly embarrassed. He muttered, that's my sword spirit. So Shidi is walking the road of spirit manifestation. Wei Sheng instantly realized. Seeing Zuo not understanding, and then remembering this guy did not study what he should be, he painstakingly explained. There are many ways to cultivate the sword, many of them strange. Sword spirit is one of these. It means to nurture the sword essence to mate it into a spirit. However, he couldn't help but glance at Luo Li several times. I really didn't see that Luo Xixiang's emotions are pretty sensitive. Seeing Zuo still not understanding, he said with a smile, people that cultivate a sword spirit mostly have sensitive feelings. This way of the sword uses emotion to enter this path of the sword. When the sword spirit is forming, it needs to use emotion as the guide for the sword spirit to take form. Zuo finally understood. Luo Li instantly blushed red. Our sect is a sword sect. Shidi must not slack off on the sword scriptures. Wei Sheng said to Zuo, ha. Zuo unconcernedly responded. He suddenly thought about the Kunlun Jade Scroll, and couldn't help but ask, this sword test conference, has the rankings come out? Who entered the top 10? Wei Sheng shook his head. Wounded like this, how can we know the situation outside? Zuo turned towards Luo Li. Luo Li also shook his head. Zuo could only say, I'll ask when Xiaoguo and the others come next time. These past few days, it had been Xiaoguo, Li Yingfeng and the others who had been looking after the 3 of them. The sect elders were not seen. The 3 of them didn't know the ranking for the sword test conference had become a great problem. Zuo's last move had disrupted the competition. Tian Songzi saw that the Great Pine Pavilion had been damaged to such a degree had instantly stopped the competition. No competitor had opposed the decision. Having seen the terrifying collision with their own eyes, they didn't have any more interest in competing. Many of the Xiozha that rushed to the explosion had been left shocked, dazed, and withered. What was even more unexpected was that the time those people spent with a low mood was much longer than others had imagined. Their elders started to become worried. From this, it could be seen just how much of a blow that world-shattering collision had given them. For Tian Songzi, who was hosting the sword test conference, there were more things that caused a headache for him. He could slowly fix the damage in the Great Pine Pavilion, but he must immediately solve the problem of the sword test conference's ranking. This was an extremely troublesome problem. Because the competition had been stopped in the middle, the number of people in the Great Pine Pavilion was far more than 10. These competitors were also all people of some strength. Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping had both been wounded and became unconscious. The other spectacular competitor, Zui Mo, also was seriously wounded and unconscious. It was not easy to rank the first 10. The reason that the 4 of Pei Yuan ran and the others were absent was due to this matter. Who could imagine a group of Jindan experts in a room shouting furiously, like a group of children? Some slammed the table, others soared, some bounced back and forth. It was very boisterous. After Pei Yuan ran and the others left Dongfu Hall, even if they were of astounding cultivation, there was tiredness on their faces. Su was lying on the bed. Even now, there was a layer of black gauze over her face. "Do you feel better today?" Lin Qian asked attentively. Su nodded and didn't speak. Lin Qian's expression was full of self-blame. He took out a jade bottle and said gently, "I didn't think you would be wounded this time. It is my fault. This youth Dan will be very beneficial for you. Consume it quickly." Su's body gently shook. Her gaze stared at the jade bottle in Lin Qian's hand. She had heard of the name Youth Dan. It was an extremely rare and expensive Ling Dan, especially suited for female Xiao to consume. It had great benefits for cultivation. Using it to heal, she felt it was a great waste. "Who really are you?" Su's gaze moved from the jade bottle to Lin Qian as she asked coldly. She had heard the name of the Youth Dan, but she was also very clear about its rarity. Heart Lake Sword Sect might be the top-tier sect in Sky Moon Jia, but such a high-grade Lingdan such as Youth Dan wasn't something they could possess. She had always assumed that Lin Qian was a disciple of one of the elders, but when he took out the Youth Dan, she suddenly realized that Lin Qian definitely couldn't be a disciple of her sect. Then the other question was, where did the sect token in Lin Qian's hand come from? What goal did he have? Su's gaze was like an arrow. Lin Qian laughed lightly, his expression normal. He gently put the Youth Dan in front of Su. "I am not Shimmy's enemy." He then asked, "The matter I asked last time, does Shimmy have the result?" Seeing the calmness on Lin Qian's face, Su hesitated and shook her head, saying, "It's not him." Lin Qian did not seem surprised at this result. He nodded. "Many thanks, Shimmy. Shimmy, please relax and rest. As to forging your sword, you can give it to this one. I will not disappoint Shimmy." Finishing, he left. Su looked at the figure that disappeared outside the door, and felt this person was even more mysterious. In a distant mountain valley of Linging sect, there were 2 people speaking. It was Chong Hung and the yellow-faced man. The expressions of the 2 seemed untouched, but their complexion and alertness was much worse than before the competition. The 2 of them had not escaped unscathed. They had been wounded to various degrees. "This is what you need." The yellow-faced man handed over a jade scroll. Chong Hung took over the jade scroll. Without looking, he put it away. The yellow-faced man saw Chong Hung didn't move and said in satisfaction, "This is the first half. It's the deposit." "After the matter is concluded, I'll give you the other half. I'll notify you of the general time." Chong Hung nodded and said expressionlessly, "All right." Finishing, he turned and left. Chapter 157 Unexpected. When Zui Mo, Wei Sheng, and Luo Li saw the sect leader and the other Shirshu, they instantly became obedient. "Humph, you guys are very good. Went to attend a sword test conference, and not one of you came back whole." Shi Fengrong, who had been working tirelessly, saw these 3, and her already bad mood became even worse. The responsibility to heal the 3 had all landed on her head. The 3 shook in fear. Shi Fengrong might be the youngest of the sect elders, but in reality, the outcome to having offended 4th Shirgu was very bad. Pei Yuan ran, and the others did not have good complexions. Everyone that was dragged to Dongfu Hall had to shout and sort out the mess. Naturally were not in good moods. Even more, these 3 disciples were seriously wounded. The expenses were very high. All right. Yin Lu came out to smooth things over. Really, you guys got yourselves into this state. As your elders, how can we not worry? You have to remember there is no meaning in one victory or defeat. As long as you are alive, you always have the chance to take it back. But if you don't have a life, what does victory mean? The three murmured. Pei Yuanran's expression relaxed slightly and took over. You're sure she was right. You have to remember this. You are the hope of the sect. In the future, the prosperity of the sect rests on you. If you do not take care of your body, you will fail the teachings the sect has given you. Haha, but you guys were very good this time. The rankings for the sword test conference have been finalized. The situation was special, so the final rankings were calculated using the Jindan Elder's judgment. All three of you are in the top 10. Wei Xing 2nd, Zuo 3rd, Luoli 7th. Luoli couldn't help ask, didn't we lose and were unconscious? Pei Yuanran narrated the situation after the sword test conference had ended before Wei Xing and Luoli understood. When they looked at Zuo, it was like they were looking at a monster. This guy was the true criminal for the ending of the competition. Zuo's head was dazed, his eyes was blank. Kunlun introductory formation Jade Scroll. He had given up hope on obtaining it for a long time now, but the sect leader was telling him that he was ranked 3rd. This meant that the Jade Scroll was basically his. Who's first? Wei Xing asked. It's Gu Rongping. Pei Yuanran glanced at Wei Xing. Afraid the other couldn't bear it, he explained. Gu Rongping's level might not be as high as you, but he suppressed you. If it really was truly a matter of life and death, the likelihood of him winning is bigger. In reality, he still had something he didn't say. Heart Lake Sword Sect was the first ranked major sect in Sky Moon Jie. How could the others not give them some face? That's right. Wei Xing nodded, unconcerned. Gu Rongping really is the strongest opponent I encountered. I learned many things this time. Seeing Wei Xing's mind was so open, Pei Yuanran was very comforted. Luoli wanted to speak when he suddenly saw Xian Yen Shibwa stare with icy eyes at Zuo. He instantly didn't dare to speak. Did Xian Yen Shibwa have some opinion about Zuo Shidi? He was slightly puzzled. Rationally, Zuo Shidi's performance this time could be labeled spectacular. Why wasn't Xian Yen Shibwa satisfied? He peeked at Zuo and found the other's eyes were unfocused as though the other had wandered away. These few days, the three of them had grown their relationship. Luoli couldn't help but panic on Zuo's behalf. He wanted to speak to remind him, but the words shrunk back when it came to his mouth. Xian Yen Shibwa's gaze was really sharp, even sharper than a flying sword. Zuo gradually came out of his shock and instinctively asked, "What time can we get the prizes?" Once the words came out, the four elders stopped speaking, their faces becoming dark. Zuo finally came back to his body. Seeing the sect leader and others have faces blacker than the bottom of a pot, he shook. Not good. The four of them stared unkindly at Zuo, causing him to have goosebumps. No one expected the first person to break the pressuring mood was Xian Yen Shibwa. However, once he opened, it was like the wind of the tundra sweeping through the room. The temperature freezing. Good. Very good. Extremely good. After 3 good. Without another word, Xian Yen Shibwa turned and left. Pei Yuanran and Yen Lu did not have good expressions. The two turned and left. Shifengrong's face was black. Her eyes looked as though she was going to skin Zuo alive. Zuo was very good at deciphering people's expressions. Seeing Master's expression, the bad feeling inside shot up, and he murmured, "Master." Very good. Shifengrong snorted coldly, turning to leave. Zuo was dumbstruck. The suddenly change also scared Wei Xing and Luoli. When had the two ever seen the elders so angry? Wei Xing hesitated before asking, "Shidi, what did you do?" "Yeah." Luoli couldn't resist. "Everyone's angry at you. You're going to die." Anyways, Zuo heard it. This guy's words were full of laughter at his misfortunes. However, he wasn't in the mood to attend to that guy. Thinking about the good that Xian Yen Shibwa had said, his heart trembled. Just offending Master, his days would be difficult. This was good. In one stroke, he had completely offended all the elders, and from the tone, it seemed to be pretty severe. What made Zuomo even more depressed was that, up until now, he didn't even understand where the problem was. Theoretically, his display this time wasn't bad. Zuomo's heart shook. Only Wei Sheng looked thoughtful. Zuomo had no solution to the anger his master, Shirshu, and the sect leader held. However, he was extremely easygoing. Knowing that it was useless to worry, he didn't think about it any further. Thinking about the Kunlun introductory formation jade scroll that was going to be in his hands soon, the worry in his heart was washed away. As Shifeng Rong had come back from Dongfu Hall, the speed the three healed at increased greatly. After a few days, they could all stand and move. They only needed to calm down and rest for a while before they fully recovered. Already sick of lying on the bed, the three went to take a breather outside. On the mountain peak, the wind was very strong. The three of them enjoyed it immensely. Only after being stuck on the bed for so long did they knew how pleasurable it was to have the cold wind blowing like this. Looking at the figures hard at work below, Wei Sheng sighed. Our sect is going to prosper. The mood of Wukong Sword Sect had transformed completely. Along the mountain valleys and in the woods, there were always figures of Wukong Sword Sect disciples working hard. All the disciples' eyes were full of admiration and respect when they saw the three of them. The present Wukong Sword Sect was full of vitality and growth. The faces of the disciples were filled with confidence and motivation that they never had before. In their eyes, this vitality Wei Sheng and the others could see hope and longing for the future of their sect. As they walked through the mountain, the three of them deeply felt it. Luo Li nodded. Not bad. After this sword test conference, our sect's position in Sky Moon Jia is set. We are unable to be stopped. His eyes also flashed with yearning and hope. The prosperity of the sect meant the core disciples would get the greatest benefits. Cultivation was not an empty building. Without Jingshi, without materials, without spells, it was impossible to catch up to other people's cultivation speeds. Zuomo was slightly unfocused, his thought wandering. Shitty, what are you thinking? Wei Sheng noticed Zuomo's absent-mindedness. Zuomo focused and disguised. I'm calculating what time I can get the prize. Wei Sheng couldn't help but grin. Luo Li's face was also helpless. But he then asked curiously, You are so greedy, but why did you pick such a crappy item? There are so many good talismans. Wei Sheng and Luo Li had been very surprised by the jade scroll that Zuomo had picked. They had all assumed that Zuomo would pick a 4th-grade talismans, or at the very least, the finest 3rd-grade talisman. They hadn't expected that he would be a nondescript jade scroll. Zuomo rolled his eyes. If you don't understand, don't talk. Luo Li was not angry. He remembered just how ugly the sect leader and the others looked when Zuomo had requested the jade scroll, and managed to understand why the sect leader and the others were so angry. He met Wei Sheng's eyes and smiled. The two of them did not warn Zuomo. Able to walk and move around, the three of them quickly moved back to their own residences. No one was willing to keep staying in Fragrant Ginger Yard. Zuomo moved back to his little West Wind Yard. Lazily soaking in the sun, when he occasionally raised his head, he could see Silly Bird on the rooftop posturing and showing off. If it was any other time, Zuomo definitely would have thrown a stone. But there was a period of time since they saw each other. He found it was quite endearing. Xiaoguo was slicing up all kinds of fruits for Xixiang. Liang Feng Shiji had brought over the fruit. Liang Feng and Zuomo were chatting. Haha, Shidi should quickly recover. This time Shidi really shocked everyone. Everyone was left speechless when the ranking came out. Liang Feng suddenly thought of something. She smiled and said, Nan Menyang entered Dongfu Hall and became Yubai's Shidi. As to Zhong Mingyan, supposedly he is very seriously wounded. Shidi has become the most unwelcome person of Dongqi Sword Sect. Dongfu has been very boring recently. Everyone is healing. The prices of recovery medicines of the market have been skyrocketing. Zuomo chomped at the fruit, the juices flying as he mumbled. Doesn't matter, it has nothing to do with me. Liang Feng smiled and said, Shidi needs to recover faster. There's many people that have come to my shop to ask if Shidi is taking orders. Shidi's reputation in formations has passed through all of Sky Moon Jia. Adding on your fame from the Golden Crow Pill, There has been many people that have placed orders. Zuo became alert. No news other than this could make him more excited. Right now, he was penniless. The gigantic formation belt he set up in the sword test conference had almost taken up all the materials he had bought from the 100 treasure flying pavilion. The prize he had picked was a jade scroll, and there wasn't one piece of jingsure there. So when he heard Li Yingfeng's news, his eyes became green. However, he thought and then shook his head. This has to wait until my wounds heal. That's natural. Li Yingfeng said. Shidi needs to rest and recover. When your body is good, you will have everything. Right, Elder Tian Songzi suddenly announced 2 days ago that the local Xiuzha, who entered the top 100, are allowed to enter the secret realm. Secret realm. Zuomo's eyes were wide. He said in disbelief. Dongfu Hall has a secret realm? They can bear to let us enter? Yes. Supposedly, it is to nurture the local younger generation. Elder Tian Songzi especially made the decision, Li Yingfeng said. The two chatted for a bit more, but Zuo wasn't interested in chatting after Li Yingfeng's weighty news. Seeing the situation, Li Yingfeng left behind a lot of healing Lingdan and left. Seeing off Li Yingfeng, Zuo pushed Xiaoguo to practice the sword. He then sunk into thought. That same day he made a decision. Seclusion. Chapter 158 Seclusion. Zuo did not impulsively decide to enter into seclusion training. The wounds on his body were mostly healed. The only thing left was rest. He needed to calm down and organize what he had gained and lost this time. This sword test conference, what he had encountered was much more than he had originally imagined. Only now did he have the time to think about it. There were many things he wanted to ask Pu Yao, like splitting his consciousness. But when he had first opened his eyes after the conference, he found that Pu Yao was in the middle of meditation. No matter how he shouted and tried to get Pu to respond, it was useless. He could only work it out himself. There were too many things that he needed to think deeply about. Another important reason that he decided to enter seclusion was the news that Li Yingfeng had about the secret realm. Zuo knew what a secret realm was. Because he knew it was a rare opportunity, he decided to enter seclusion. There would be many opportunities inside the secret realm. If he was lucky and found some rare materials, he would really make a profit. But it would be wrong to think of the secret realm as his own Ling fields. Tian Songzi was allowing everyone to explore the secret realm, and this suggested that this secret realm was still unexplored because if it had already been explored and all the rare materials had been taken away, then there would be no meaning to letting people explore it again. In the secret realm, other than the opportunities, what was more prominent was the danger. Secret realms were usually guarded by Yao beasts. The more rare and valuable the item, the stronger the guardian Yao beast was. Other than Yao beasts, what was harder to defend against was the hearts of people. Direct benefits meant direct conflicts of interest. Different from the competition of the Great Pine Pavilion, there would not be judges, no one calling a stop to fights. The fighting would be even more straightforward and bare. If someone killed for treasure, Zuo wouldn't be surprised. The world was like this. But it would be too stupid not to attend due to this risk. To be able to gain something, other than being lucky, it required strength. He might have been ranked third, but he knew his own strength. Luck was a major factor in his third-place ranking. The formations that he was skilled in were not suited for fighting. He guessed that the sect leader would have the 3 disciples from their sect to move together at that time. Undoubtedly, the 3-pronged trident of Wukong sword sect would form the strongest team. After them, it would probably be the team of Yu Bai and Nan Menyang. However, Zuo didn't want to drag the others down. Other Xiuzha may avoid them due to their strength, but those Yao beasts wouldn't recognize them. There were too many comprehensions from this sword test conference that he needed to organize. He also needed to do a thorough examination of his 5-colored pagoda. Pu Yao was always unreliable at the most crucial times, Zuo thought irritably. Wukong Hall. He's in seclusion? Pei Yuanran said. Other than Xianyan, who was still cold and unaffected, the other two appeared to have a headache. Yan Lu rubbed his forehead and said, He does need to seclude himself and ponder the experiences he received this time. Ponder what? Shifeng was furious when it was mentioned. She clearly remembered the mockery from the audience. Ponder his formations? Or ponder how to make Jingshi? When she remembered how Zhuo had asked when the prizes were being awarded when he heard he was third, anger poured out of her heart. Why did she have such a greedy disciple who didn't like the sword? She couldn't help but peek at the cold second Shixiang, the anger in her heart growing even stronger. She knew that second Shixiang was really angry this time. This little ruffian, he made second Shixiang angry. Shifeng raged. She decided to find a chance to sort out this lawless guy. No matter. Let him enter seclusion. Xianyan suddenly opened to the surprise of everyone else. They had grown together from childhood and knew each other very well. It just wasn't Shifeng who saw he was angry. Seeing Zhuo continuing to delve further into formations and not study what was right, Xianyan did not stop him. According to their thinking, Xianyan should personally have gone and grabbed Zhuo, severely punishing him, and then guide him onto the proper path. Wukong Hall was a patch of silence. Everyone was shocked at Xianyan's attitude. In the silence, Xianyan's cold and pressuring voice echoed. I will make him understand why Sword Xiu can unite and lead the world of cultivation. Wukong Formation Sect. He can't go. The murderous and dark voice made the other three shudder. Sympathy came onto their faces. Zhuo didn't know at this time just how decisive Xianyan Sherbu's resolution was. He quickly received his prize. Just like he had imagined, this jade scroll came into his hands without a problem. His choice surprised many people. The sword test conference might have finished, but the events of the sword test conference still made waves in Dongfu. There were praises and mockery. Zhuo's choice was the most unexpected choice in the top 10. Whatever this scalping zombie did always surprised people. Zhuo was not concerned with this. With the jade scroll in his possess, he had no more cares, perfect for seclusion. He burrowed into the stone room and entered meditation. Inspecting the situation inside his body, he found his state was bad. The wounds he received this time were much more severe than he had imagined. Under Master's care, the channels in his body had basically healed, but compared to him at his peak they had shrunk. Zhuo decided to nurture of his channels. It was not difficult to nurture channels. It was only using Ling power to slowly permeate the channels and reawaking the vitality inside. However, it was a detailed job and especially demanded patience. Luckily, Zhuo was not in a rush. Slowly nurturing the channels, he took the chance and examined his own body in detail. The Ling power would be absorbed by the Mo matrix automatically when it came close to him. The Mo matrix would automatically take in Ling power. What Zhuo marveled at was that the Mo matrix, other than automatically taking in Ling energy, it was like a filter and automatically purified the power. Tempering Ling power was a step that was unavoidable in cultivation. Ling power that was not purified was not only unable to be used, but could also harm the body. But with the marvelous Mo matrix, Zhuo did not need to spend time on purification. The problem of storing Ling power was still unresolved. The Ling power would be absorbed through the Mo matrix into the body, circulate through the channels, and dissipate inside the body. The greatest storage place inside his body for Ling power was his dantian. Compared to the Ling power that was absorbed into his body, it could only be considered a small pond. The remaining Ling power was unable to be stored. They flowed along the channels and dissipated into the body. Normal Xiuzhe needed to spend long periods of time to absorb Ling power, tempering it over and over to purify it. It would take a long time to fill the dantian. But Zhuo felt the problem was not this. If a Xiuzhe was a container, and the amount of things this container could hold became smaller, then it definitely was a problem with the container. In other words, something was likely wrong with the dantian. His thoughts were very clear. As expected, when he focused his attention on his dantian, he finally understood why his cultivation would increase so slowly. The dantian was like a pool, and the Ling power the water inside the pool. However, this pool was marvelous in that, as the water rose, the walls of the pool would also rise. That way the Ling power stored inside the body would increase. However, The problem was with the MO matrix. He didn't know what that asshole, Puyao, was thinking. One region of the MO matrix coincidentally passed through his dantian. It was like there were two holes in the wall of a pool, and once the water inside the pool rose above the height of the holes, the water would be lost. His Ling power was spilling out through the holes. These two holes were not small, so even though there was water constantly added to the pool, the height of water inside the pool would not rise. Zuemo couldn't help but grimace. He really had tasted the bitterness of low cultivation in the sword test conference. His cultivation was not enough. It meant that he had no strength to face someone else in the open. Tricks may be hard for people to deal with, but if he used them too many times, it wouldn't work. Damn it. Even though he knew what the problem was, he didn't know what to do. Changing the dantian wasn't something a person like him who was just in Juji could accomplish. Without any other solution, he could only open his eyes. He could only slowly work on the problem of cultivation. It was useless to rush. He could only comfort himself with the fact that finally knew what the problem was. Now he only had to slowly think of a solution. Compared to the pause in his Ling power, his consciousness had rising quickly, and without his knowledge, he had broken through to fifth breath. In the void above his sea of consciousness, there was another star. In reality, before the sword test conference, Zuemo didn't have many good feelings about the embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. It may have been able to increase Ling power, but its primary effect was strengthening the consciousness. For Zuemo, the consciousness had been far less important than Ling power. Even more, it was strong in cultivating his consciousness, but there was no way to use his consciousness. In a person as pragmatic as Zuemo's eyes, it was useless. But now Zuemo placed much more importance on embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation than any other scripture or spell. That strange and indescribable state, the ethereal star dust, the feeling as though it was a part of his body. Zuemo looked at the five-colored pagoda in his hand. A feeling rose as though it was connected to his blood. The little pagoda was like a part of his body, intimate and familiar. The other reason he entered seclusion was for the five-colored pagoda. In the fight during that last great clash, he had been severely wounded, and the five-colored pagoda had also received severe damage. He had master to help heal him, but only he could work on the damage of the five-colored pagoda. The five-colored pagoda was dim and dull, and had cracks over the body. If it wasn't for the feeling of connectedness that existed between them, Zuemo would be suspicious that this wasn't his five-colored pagoda. Feeling the weakness passed on by the five-colored pagoda, Zuemo couldn't help but reach out and caress the five-colored pagoda. He closed his eyes, his mind sinking into the five-colored pagoda. Entering the five-colored pagoda, he jumped in fright. Inside the five-colored pagoda, the five balls of five-element essence were all dim, so faint that they appeared to be able to vanish at any moment. The ball of consciousness weakly floated in the middle of the five balls of elemental essence, without any of the liveliness of before. If the five-colored pagoda had been the beginnings of a five-element world before, then this five-element world was now on the edge of disintegration. Zuemo's expression was terrible. The situation was worse than he had imagined. Chapter 159. Gains the power of the five-colored pagoda, had left a deep impression on Zuemo. What was most precious was the feeling of connectedness, as though it was his arm or finger. He had never felt the same with other talismans. It was hard to determine just how much he had imprinted on it, but it was now the most powerful talisman in Zuemo's possession. In Zuemo's eyes, it wasn't just a talisman. It could control the formations. Didn't that mean that he had an extra set of hands? He also had a feeling inside that if the five-colored pagoda really was ruined, he would also be affected. There were never such beneficial and fortuitous incidents in this world. If it was connected deeply to him as though it were his arms, then if his arms broke, how could he be unaffected? No matter the cost, he needed to fix the five-colored pagoda. Zuemo gritted his teeth. He took out all the materials from his ring and threw them inside the pagoda. The five-colored pagoda seemed extremely hungry. When the materials left his hands, they were sucked away. One by one, The materials entered the five-colored pagoda, and were deconstructed and converted into the five elemental essences. Zuemo saw the materials flow like water into the five-colored pagoda, and felt pain. These materials were all bought with large sums of jingshi. Now they had all been fed to the five-colored pagoda. However, what comforted him slightly was this solution was extremely effective. The cracks on the body of the five-colored pagoda slowly disappeared with speed visible to the naked eye. He could feel the five-element world inside the five-colored pagoda, being supplied by large amounts of five-element essence and gradually stabilize. But the empty ring left Zuemo with a feeling of heartache. Competing in the sword test conference had completely cost him all his wealth. He had an impulse to spit blood. What he wanted to spit blood at even more was the five-colored pagoda. Hadn't fully recovered, even as the last bit of material was absorbed. Compared to the pagoda's original condition, it was still much dimmer in color. Heavens, how large of a quantity of materials would be needed to completely repair it? How much jingshi would that require? Zuemo didn't just have any jingshi, and he had no materials left at all. It's been a long time since he was so poor. Just at this time, a ball of substance that appeared to be gray mud flew out of the five-colored pagoda into Zuemo's palm. Zuemo stilled. This was the first time he had seen the five-colored pagoda spit something out. Quickly, the five-colored pagoda passed on information that allowed him to understand what this gray mud was. Everything belonged to the five elements. This was an extremely broad generalization. In this world, there were still a few things that did not belong to the five elements. The little ball of gray mud in Zuemo's hands would be the remnants after the five-colored pagoda deconstructed the materials into the five elemental energies. These remains did not belong inside the five elements, so it was not absorbed by the five-colored pagoda, and was pushed out. The corners of Zuemo's eyes jerked. Eat mine, drink mine, and now shitting on my hand. The brat, he was lawless. Burning in rage, he raised his hand to throw the gray mud at the five-colored pagoda. The five-colored pagoda seemed to know Zuemo was angry and skipped away to dodge. But the hand Zuemo raised up suddenly stopped, the anger inside disappearing without a trace. It did not belong inside the five elements. Right, this stuff didn't belong inside the five elements. Five elements contain all. There were extremely small number of things that were not. And without an exception, these items were all extremely rare. These days, what did rarity mean? One word. Expensive. Zuemo suddenly became excited. That's right, the rarer it was, the more expensive it was. The gray mud in his hands was not inside the five elements and definitely should be valuable. Thinking about it, he carefully scraped the mud off his hands into a jade bottle, and then put the jade bottle inside a sandalwood box before putting it inside the ring. Sometime in the future, he should inquire to how much jingshi the gray mud was worth. The five-colored pagoda temporarily stabilized. Zuemo's mood was better now that he found another use for the five-colored pagoda. Looking at the five-colored pagoda, he was reminded of his consciousness and the stardust. The stars in his consciousness had slowly scattered. However, when he inspected his consciousness, there had not been any change. That was normal. With the slow speed that the stars shed off stardust, it would take a long time for the star dust to spread into the entirety of his consciousness. Zuemo speculated a large amount of stardust was needed to create evident change. Of course, it could also just be his dream. Maybe there would not be a change at all. He quickly threw the problem of the consciousness to one side. Formations. His abilities with formations had surprised people, and also increased his confidence. Whenever he thought about the peerless power of the moonchime sound storm, of the Skyring moonchime formation, he still couldn't help but become excited. 1 against 5, each person multiple times stronger than him. Even if it was only one move, and it was the five-colored pagoda controlling it, even if it was a fight inside the formation belt. Even so, that battle was something that he would never have been able to imagine before. Even now, he still felt it was like a dream. If he had a deeper understanding of formations, if his control could be stronger, if he had been more careful in setting the formations, a fight like that could appear again, it could be copied. Even more, He now had an introductory formation jade scroll from Kunlun. Suddenly, Zhuemo was full of confidence about the future. Xiaogua absent-mindedly practiced the sword. Xixiang was in seclusion. For some reason, when Xixiang was absent, her motivation to practice the sword was much less. This was not right, Xiaogua told herself. But the sword in her hand was still so heavy, and her steps weak. You have to concentrate when practicing the sword. A voice came from behind her. Xiaogua's movements stopped. Turning, her apple face was full of joyful surprise. Xixiang. Zhuemo tapped Xiaogua's head, taking on the mannerism of a Xixiang to lecture. Not concentrating on practicing the sword. Do you want to be disciplined? And look at your sword, so weak, it only has the appearance. Seeing Xixiang continue on, spit flying, Xiaogua's eyes couldn't help but smile into 2 crescent moons. After lecturing Xiaogua, Zhuemo laid down on the lounge chair lazily, without any awareness of being a role model. Silly Bird stared disdainfully at Zhuemo and continued to preen her own feathers. The feeling of the sun on his body was so good. Xixiang, you finished your seclusion? Xiaogua timidly asked. Oh yes, it's done. Zhuemo stretched lazily, closing his eyes and enjoying the warm sunshine. He had gained greatly from this seclusion. Kunlun was really Kunlun. Each time it was mentioned, Zhuemo was full of awe for this legendary sect. He had rejoiced countless times that he had chosen this jade scroll, and how wise he was. Just an introductory formation jade scroll, but it contains so many kinds of formations. The first time he read the jade scroll, he was completely stunned. In his eyes, this jade scroll had the qualifications to be called the complete book of basic formations. Zhuemo could be considered to be a hobbyist in collecting jade scrolls, but he had never thought that a jade scroll could contain such rich and comprehensive content. In comparison, the jade scrolls of the sect were so simple and rough it was embarrassing. Inside the formation, there were more than 200 types of basic formations, and there were all kinds of analyses. These analyses that came from the Kunlun formation experts had broadened Zhuemo's vision. All of his own ideas that he had been very proud of had been encompassed in the breadth of the jade scroll. Just a few phrases on each formation were sharp as a knife, pinpointing the essence of each profound and cryptic formation. Each formation was easily deconstructed, and their relation to each other was revealed with clarity. Zhuemo was entranced. This wasn't learning, it was a peerless pleasure. The moment he picked up the jade scroll, he could not stop himself from delving in. Without sleep or rest, nor drink and food, he muttered to himself like he was sleep-talking, and laughed excitedly like he was insane. When he finished reading the last analysis in the jade scroll, he was extremely depressed. An introductory jade scroll could have such power. What he gained was multiple times what he had imagined. He was like a child that had been swimming in a pond and suddenly saw the ocean. Is Xixiang going to seclusion again? Xiaogua asked timidly. Oh no. There's no Jingshi to get in seclusion. Zhuemo lazily said. He suddenly thought of a question and asked, where are eldest Xixiang and Luoli Xixiang? What are they busy with? Hearing that Zhuemo wasn't going back into seclusion, Xiaogua's eyes turned to crescents. Eldest Xixiang and Luoli Xixiang are all in seclusion. Zhuemo made a sound of acknowledgement. He wasn't surprised. Dongfu. The sword test conference had finished. All the experts went back to their own homes. Dongfu instantly became less lively. Of course, compared to the Dongfu of the past, it was much more prosperous. This year's sword test conference had caused Dongfu to stand out in the 13 primary towns. Not long in the future, it would be the time Tian Songzi promised to open the secret realm. Even though they could not attend, but many still stayed, especially those who desperately needed certain hard-to-obtain materials. What secret realms were most famous for was producing all kinds of treasures. Larger material merchants also sent people to wait. Zhuemo rode Silly Bird and headed straight to the 100 Treasures Flying Pavilion. There were many more people in the 100 Treasures Flying Pavilion, which surprised him. Coming for the second time, he was not as cautious as before. Welcoming Zhuemo was still the same storekeeper as last time. When he saw Zhuemo, he congratulated. Congratulations, congratulations. Mr. Zhuo really is extraordinary. That last attack made my heart stop. Then he pushed his voice lower and said, Hee, many thanks to Mr. Zwa. Zwa stilled. How so? Mr. Zwa had great skill to forge the 5-colored pagoda into a soul-tethered talisman. Our store also has benefited. Zwa finally understood. However, what he realized was not the increase in the customers, but why the 5-colored pagoda was so powerful now. So it had become his soul-tethered talisman. To a guy like him who had made deep study of talismans, how could he not know soul-tethered talismans? Soul-tethered talisman. He was slightly excited but did not show it on his face. Just like usual, he grasped the main point. That's great. In the future, give me a bit of a discount. Hearing this, the storekeeper could only laugh along. Zwa was not concerned, asking, Is Miss Sue here? Yes, please come with me. The storekeeper hurriedly reached forward to usher him, clearly having already received orders. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.